allegiance, please, Reggie. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sasha, will you?
Yes. Orstein. Silla. May. Here. Egger.
Here.
Dachi.
Here. Okay, thank you. We did hold a closed session in the report. There was no reportable actions from the closed session. The next order of business is the approval of agenda. And for the first one, I would like to move item 9. Did Mr. Silver move there? Yeah, good. Okay, so I'd like to move item 9 just after 6. Is that okay? Is there any other members of the public here that want to speak on an item in the agenda? It's in the agenda.
We're not done here on the agenda.
No, I know, I'm asking you.
Oh.
Yeah.
About the matching funds for the sewer replacement?
Okay, but it isn't on the agenda, so we'll put you can speak under open time, we're not there yet.
Okay, perfect.
I'm
That's
doing
fine.
the agenda still. What I want to do is, if there's public here that wants to speak on an item in the agenda, I'd like to move it closer so that we don't sit through a meeting. If it's not on the agenda, that comes right up.
If I may, we've got item 12, and last time I was at the Marin Municipal Water District Board meeting, and I don't know if there's a rep here from MMWD tonight or not. They thought they might send one, but we've got item 12 on, and if we could move that one up.
Okay.
We do have a Larry Bragdon, who's a director-elect. I think he takes office.
Is that okay with everybody if we move item 12 up?
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll move that after 9,
Up to
okay?
the, okay.
But that's going to be, they're going to be right after 6.
Okay.
And Tom, I want to let everybody know I need to leave at 7:45 this evening. So
Okay.
when I get up,
Okay.
my apologies.
Any change in any items on the consent calendar? No, we can pull those later. Okay. So, any other changes to the agenda?
I move approval as amended. And I think we're moving 9, we're
Any
moving
other
9 up.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. Now is an open time for public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agendas. Members of the public may address the board regarding issues you wish to talk about. Generally, we ask that you speak for about 3 minutes, but we're not too strict on that. So is there anybody in the public that would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Ann Williver. I live at 99 Alder Avenue in San Anselmo. And I'm here on behalf of myself and also my neighbors because we're all suffering the same consequences of aged sewer lines. And I'm in the process of replacing mine. And I filled out the forms and found out that there were no more funds in the matching.
Okay, then that's an agenda item. That's agenda item 12. We're going to be.
Oh, that's the one. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you can discuss it then. You, sir? Cynthia, okay. Anybody else in the public that would like to make a comment? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item, we're going to discuss item 9. Consideration of customer request for retroactive lateral grant funds.
Wait, I just have a quick question. Did you jump over the consent?
We're coming back to
No,
it.
yeah, I
Coming back?
did. Yeah.
Okay, just so
I
I
moved ahead of
wasn't sure.
the standing committee
Okay,
request.
that's fine.
Okay, so this is consideration of customer request for retroactive lateral grant funds, 120 Crane in San Anselmo. Staff?
Sure, I'll do just a quick overview and hand it back to the board. You have the staff report and also some of the attachments, which include some of the correspondence on the topic between the customer and staff. So this is a request for having the customer retroactively receive additional funds under the lateral replacement grant program. So basically in summary, the customer followed all of the standard processes and completed this work near the tail end of the prior fiscal year, so fiscal year 13-14. and entered into the grant agreement under those terms and conditions. The work was completed, the allowable maximum grant funding was provided to the customer. And then subsequently, the district was in mid-stride, essentially, of adopting and moving on to the new fiscal year, which would start July 1st of 2014. And in the process of developing that budget and all the related programs and so on that go with it, we had made some specific changes to the lateral replacement grant program. And specifically, we had increased the maximum funding level going into the new fiscal year from $2,500 to $4,000, effective at the start of the new fiscal year. So we had a number of requests of a similar nature at the time because of the close proximity, and of course, since we were in the middle of discussing that anticipated change, people said, well, should I stop my work, and so forth. We tried to deliver a consistent message that said, you entered into the grant contract under this year's conditions, and that's what we're trying to honor and stick to. This one request was ultimately being brought to the board's attention. Staff attempted to resolve it. We have paid out the full allowable amount. And the request is basically for an additional $1,500, which is the difference between the new maximum funding level of $4,000 and the prior fiscal year's maximum funding limit of $2,500. You have, so staff's recommendation is to not provide the additional funding, and the reason is really, in essence, is a matter of consistency and adhering to the contract and the process that was adopted, and the potential difficulties of beginning to retroactively grant these, especially with the incredible increase in activity that we're seeing on the grant program. So that is the basis for the staff's recommendation. It's not that any rules weren't followed. This process ran the appropriate course, but it was done under the prior fiscal year's terms and conditions, and we treated all of the other requests in that manner, and so that the consistency consideration, I think, is first and foremost. You have correspondence between the customer and staff documenting the request and providing some of the backup information. Relatively straightforward. I won't go through that. And the board is presented with really the couple of alternatives. You can grant the request. You can deny the request in its entirety, or if there's some middle ground you want to consider, that is an alternative as well. And I think the customer is probably in attendance this evening,
Yes.
so I'll stop there and hand it back to the board.
Okay, so the process will be that there might be initial discussion from the board, and then we'd ask Mr. Zimmerman to make a presentation, and then we bring it back to the board. And of course, if anybody else wants to comment from the public, you're perfectly welcome. So are there any initial comments from the board?
Well, I have questions.
Question?
We have not given this like extra money, this has not happened before to us, where we've been approached for extra funds because of the way the policy was written and it was changed. This has not happened to us before.
I know that in the past we have had
Because I don't,
situations. Yeah.
I don't know at the office level
Mhm.
of potential for denials that have already occurred, so I need some more history if you have some.
You mean, so in prior fiscal years, Pam?
Yeah.
Okay. In prior fiscal years, the one situation I'm aware of is where we have exhausted funds, and then people have gone on waiting lists until funds were replenished, and then we provided awards. I do think that there has been at least a handful of cases where appeals have been made to the board for this type of retroactive. I'm going to ask Danielle if you can address any specific examples of that.
Retroactive ones that have gone before the board in the past have really just been somebody that maybe had an emergency situation or was not aware of the grant program when they went forward with their project, then found out about it after, or then tried to go forward with the grant program. And at the beginning, they were brought to the board for a decision, but this is back when Brett was here, so a year and a half 2 years ago at this point. And he had made a decision that it wasn't worth board time, so there was sort of standard procedures that were sort of internally created so that we could handle those in-house, so that we didn't have to bring it to board.
Have we gotten a number of requests for, retroactive additional payments? How many about?
I'd say about 15 to 20.
About 15 or 20.
Oh.
And we're actually out of money for our lateral program. We've got refunded, it's been so popular. Any other board comments at this time? I'll bring it back.
That was the question I was gonna have. Would we be setting a precedent? Are there gonna be more folks coming in, under the same
There might be.
issue? I mean, staff used the policies in place and made a correct decision, so it's here before the board.
Yeah. And actually, I don't think staff could really, change the district policy. I mean, it's in
It's in the
law, so
ordinance.
they're carrying out our direction, and they have to do that. Any other comments from the board right now? We'll
I
come back.
one, Danielle or Greg, does every person who requests this get this letter with the third paragraph that says they're welcome to come before the full board?
He's the only, I'm sorry.
Go
Go ahead.
Mr. Silverberg is the only one that's pursued it to that level.
But presumably if somebody else did, they would get the letter that says you're welcome to go before.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
I
I'm
just,
sorry.
yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that opportunity was offered to other people who may have had the same complaint.
So let's take it out to the public. Does anybody
Can I just have a point of order?
Sure.
Till that, would the applicant like to say something?
Well, yeah, that's what we're gonna do, yeah.
It's usually the.
Sir, would you like to?
Yeah, well, first of all, in our case, the replacement
You're
was
Mr.
not
Silverman.
Silverberg.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in our case, the replacement was not
Silverman.
entirely voluntary. It was basically mandated by the district because they were repaving, the county was gonna repave our roads. So they asked for us to have it inspected and see if we needed a replacement. And they were gonna subsequently place a moratorium on digging up the street. And I guess there would be a large fine if you were trying to do it after the repaving. So, as Greg mentioned, we were approved for our project just a week before July 1st when the increase took effect. But the work didn't actually commence and complete until well into July, well into the next fiscal year. They originally estimated $7,000 to do the job, but they couldn't do a trenchless replacement, so it ended up costing us $12,500 to replace the sewer line. I wasn't informed of the increase by the sanitary district, but I did call and talk to Danielle, and she said they had no idea that it was gonna be increasing, and so all our neighbors had to do the same thing. All of them after us, all of them got the $4,000. Just seems a little bit like we were pretty proactive, but we got basically screwed because we jumped on it right away and they procrastinated and got the $4,000. People who waited, it didn't seem to be urgent, even though the letter said they were gonna start repaving as early as April. But miraculously, the paving started about 3 days after the last sewer line was replaced. So I think it was probably they were waiting until everyone finished. What really got me frustrated was I found out that some people were actually informed that the increase was going to take place and to hold off on submitting their applications. I don't want to name names, but one person told me that he was asked to keep it confidential that the rate would be increasing, and he waited to submit his application before that happened. If you want names, I'll give them, but I'd rather not throw them out there in the meeting. But that amount of money represented a financial hardship and something we didn't anticipate, almost $13,000 to the sewer line.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Any other public wish to comment? I know that the fine would be from if you dig up the pavement, it wouldn't be from our district, would it be from the city of Sanitary?
Correct, it's, whoever owns the road, is it county? or-
County, and they told me if you did it afterwards, you'd have to pay from curb to curb, and it was an incredible amount of money.
So
that's the
Just for that.
mandate you're talking about?
What's the exact
Moratorium,
mandate?
it's, the term you're looking for is moratorium, Pam, and the paving moratorium is what the agency that owns the road, it's very common these days, if they make a major road upgrade, they impose a 5 or 6 year moratorium, and if you need to cut the road in between that, you, as you described, you basically face much more expensive patching and replacement conditions than you would prior to the moratorium, so it's a very strong disincentive to disturb the pavement sooner than the end of the
But that,
moratorium.
but that's not
It's not the
our,
district,
it's,
no,
it's,
no.
okay.
It's,
Just to
but
make-
it's
Cause I just
a
make sure.
practical
that-
impact.
Well, that was in the letter I got from you guys.
Okay.
Basically said.
So you didn't
it is-
have to do the sewer lateral, but you would.
No, there's nothing wrong with
did
it, but
you know,
we had to
so
do it
That's
because of the-
certainly what we wanted.
No, well-
Was there, did we do a, I've been hearing complaints from some realtors that were doing smoke checks, not smoke checks, but pressure tests on laterals. Are we doing pressure tests on laterals?
No, not yet, Frank, I think the communications on that you're getting are related to the lateral ordinance, so that is not in play in this particular.
Okay, so we didn't do a
Yeah.
pressure test.
Correct.
So how did everyone have their laterals tested with a camera to find out they needed replacement, or did they just, everybody have to
Yeah.
replace
They
it?
requested.
Well, what we did in this case, I believe this is one of the zones, and it was, what we did was, we knew there were a couple of major paving projects coming up.
Mhm.
And so we did, this was sort of a pilot project to see if we could help, increase the lateral replacement activity. Was ahead of the paving, we offered free CCTV inspections to property owners in the affected area, with the idea being that they could get a free CCTV inspection. That would help them determine if their lateral needed to be replaced, and then they could act on that ahead of the paving project if they chose to do so.
Okay.
So this was one of the first opportunities for us to try that approach. And as we talked about in the other item on the agenda this evening, that did result in a very substantial amount of lateral replacement activity. So from that perspective, we actually consider it a very successful outreach program, but it obviously.
So
We
the
are,
question is, did they all need replacing, or were we replacing good laterals?
Oh, no. And we don't, the grant program has a set of criteria you have to meet before we authorize funds for replacement. And one of the purposes of those is to not allow for unnecessary replacements. So unless there was something unusual that I don't understand about this one, I would assume that the inspection that was done ahead of time showed the need for the lateral to be replaced based on its condition. And correct me if I'm misstating anything, but I don't think anyone is implying or stating that the lateral that did not need to be replaced based on its condition was unnecessarily replaced. I hope that's clear to everybody.
Yeah, there's a qualification to get a grant, and the lateral has to need replacement, and, some other qualifications that we have. One thing that I would like to consider in this specific case, the board at the time passed the increase on, I think it was on June 18th. We passed, we went from $2,500 to $4,000. That was June 18th. And then Mr. Silverberg signed his letter June 24th after that, after the board had approved it. And I think that this might be an exception for us because, the board can decide, but if you waited a week, I think maybe you might have, or if you delayed.
If I waited a week, I definitely would have had it.
So I think anybody that signed a letter between June 18th and July 1, that sounds pretty, in other words, we knew we were going to increase the lateral. I mean, I don't want to open it up to everybody to be given the grants to, because we want to save this money for future lateral replacements. We really love the program. That's my impression. What do you think, folks?
I don't think we should do that. Being a planning commissioner for 8 years, if we had people come up after something was passed within a week and said, oh, well, okay, we'll change it for you. And then let's say maybe, I don't know how long back, all these other people were whatever, they're all gonna come forward. And we can't just do something special for one and then deny the others that retroactively are gonna want. I mean, it's a sad story. I'm here, I understand it. 1,500 would help, and I know your bill went from 7,000 to 12,000. But I think as we have the policies, and it just was a bad timing. So maybe council can.
Was part of your policy to inform some people to hold off on?
Well, that's a horse with a different color. I don't know how, I think that was by, somebody told you something. I mean, I have people on the street come up to me and say, gee, I'm worried about my lateral.
I'll give you the guy's name and address.
Okay,
You
but
can
how
ask
much
him.
money's in your grant lateral program? And I'll
It's not
say,
gonna help people.
so, you know, I'm just, yeah, I mean, that's another piece to this.
But see, Pam,
Is
we.
that just
Wait,
a
let me
policy?
let me
Okay, I'm sorry.
finish.
Thought you were.
But I just like council to chime in, to speak to this, because I really want to help, but I don't want us to, and we've had this problem with people who came forward, what was it? It was for
Rates.
rates.
The rates.
We've had
Rates,
all these
yeah.
people because they got one deal and then everybody else wanted these extra money, and it went on and on and on, thousands and thousands of dollars.
What's the
Water
question?
So the
Water
question
bills
is
and
for Jolie, what's your take and how would you?
Well, if you start not enforcing the policy, or you enforce it against some and not others, it is going to set a dangerous precedent. So it is a board policy, it's adopted policy, and
The grant program
Yeah.
itself, I believe it is a 2009 is the basic policy when it was adopted.
and then we increased it from 2,500 to 4.
The only things that have changed throughout the history of the program is
The amount,
Is the amount.
and then the amount when it ran out, and then putting people on a waiting list, so.
Director Nix, you see, I don't think there would be very many. We're not gonna go back before July 18th, no matter what. But I'm thinking that since we passed it, he could have delayed.
Can I ask you a question? How many people are in that category for that 1 week? How many people would you anticipate?
Probably
Danielle
less
does.
than
I do know exactly, actually, it's 3.
3.
But if we do that, then other people will say, look, you changed it for this person for 1 week, then why can't you change it for me?
Because we changed it, we did it after we had already passed the increase. That's what we can say. Before June 18th, we only had a program for $2,500. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I feel like we've been in this, an analogous situation with the leaks that people had and coming in with their water bills. And at one point, early on when I was on the board, I thought like, well, we can do this. It's not that much money. He did what we wanted him to do. He's replacing his lateral. But what we need to do legally, as I understand it, is to put down why exactly we did this, very clearly why we veered off of our written policy, so as to prevent future.
Yeah, we do need to make reasons and make some
Findings of-
findings, yeah, because we don't want to look like we're arbitrarily enforcing a policy, or we also don't want to look like we're into the gift of public money situation, so that is another
Right.
issue. Maybe at the time when we increased it, but it's after the fact, when we increased it to 4,000, no one knew we were going to be having this lag, or people that are going to be caught up in the 2,500 versus the 4,000.
Well, and another way to distinguish it, if we wanted to go with your sentiment, Tom, is to say the work didn't begin until after, right?
Well, that would be a
Work
lot
didn't-
more than 3. That would
Okay.
be-
Oh, boy, you worked all this out, haven't you?
Sorry.
But she knows she runs the company.
Yeah, but anticipating our splitting of hairs.
I mean, we don't have an amnesty period on the policy, correct? And that's because then, this, I don't know what to say.
You see, I have to admit, it's the same thing with a connection fee. Sometimes we approve connection, we have a connection fee of X, and then boom, we approve a jump. And people say, well, I paid the lower connection fee a month ago.
Yesterday.
This guy's gonna pay a huge one. What do you folks think?
My heart says yes. You know, my heart says yes, and I'm very concerned about, then well, he got it, and why
That's-
can't I get it? And then next year, well, last year you did it,
Right.
and my heart just totally says, and I am concerned about that the policy is what it says, and that we're just opening ourselves up to big disputes, and
Well, for me, if, you know, if the board wanted to direct the staff to come back with a finding at the next meeting that would, in effect, justify a small window for giving the 2014-15 rebate, that might be an option, rather than just saying tonight yes or no. I mean, no seems to be the logical answer, but if the board wants to say yes, then I think there have to be some very specific findings that we bring back, so we don't get caught up in a situation where we've got 30 more people now coming back wanting to correct, right?
And justify, I mean, why is the period June 18th to July 1st? Why is that?
We passed it, we took the action on
Yeah,
we
June
passed it
18th,
on
at the
June
June
18th.
18th meeting.
And what's special about July 1st?
That's
That
when
was
it
That was
started.
when we
Went
actually.
into effect July
yeah.
1st.
It went in effect.
So that it's the, I mean, if we had instead said, as of this minute, then you would get 4,000. But, you know, we consciously didn't. We said as of July 1, so that's the
You
challenge.
know, staff has written memos on this already, Frank, and, you know, they interpreted our direction, so I kind of like the side of this to
No, I'm not questioning staff's interpretation at all, I think the staff is right. So, but what I'm saying is, if we're gonna make an exception here, we need to bring back a set of findings that makes it clear as to why this is gonna be done. That's all.
Absolutely. You know,
You know, another month isn't
You gotta
gonna make that
have a
much
reason.
difference, I don't think, to the applicant, whether or not they
Well,
get
as,
it tonight
we may not have a
or next
majority that wants
month.
to do that, though.
But we don't know if there's 3 votes to do that, so.
Do we have a motion?
Well, it's gonna, so Joey, do you have any experience with this of?
Well,
I mean, basically, you're gonna ask to amend the policy or create it in a way, and then we're gonna get people coming forward. You amended the policy for one person, then everybody's gonna
Yeah,
want
one
to
person
amend
or
it.
these 3 people, and it will,
I
it
don't know how
can
to go
open you
around
up
it.
to more people saying, you know, you did it to them, and now I want it, and why can't we make it? But knowing that we passed it June 18th to be effective July 1st, and he and some others may have been caught up in that transition period, that could be a good finding. But you are opening yourself up to having other people come in and say, look, you know, this is what happened. But if you want to have staff come back with a finding and say, this is why we're doing it, and then the next time it comes up, you can say, no, we had this consideration, this is how we looked at it, and this is how we're gonna look at it from the future. And,
It's gonna take time for you to go full.
well, yeah, staff and I can work on it.
Something, right?
No, but the one thing I know, the board president brought up connection fees. Well, when after the connection fees are in effect, if someone paid them at the lower fee and then the next person came along and the new fees were in, they would pay the higher fee.
Yeah.
We don't go back and start.
No.
And even in a big subdivision, if they pulled connection fees for part of it and got a lower rate and then a second phase came in, we would make them pay the higher connection fee. And I know with the sewer bills, the sewer rate bills, and people having water leaks, and those we look at on a case-by-case basis because they have to come in and justify the reduction in there, and it's sort of an appeal to you. So we are opening ourselves up to more appeals, but if we come back with some sort of set finding, or maybe we maybe we amend the policy to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future.
So one of the things, you know, what is the administrative basis for this at the moment is really just the 2009 policy. And it's a, you know, it authorizes the program. And then we have some pretty specific requirements and guidelines that are in the application materials and so forth. But this to me is a little bit comparative to the situation we had on the rates, where the rate ordinance not yet been updated, and we were dealing with this every so often, these slew of requests for various types of refunds, and I think the board was struggling for consistency. And what we ended up doing, when we did adopt the new rate ordinance, we put a lot of time and effort into setting a lot of very specific information to avoid those situations in the future. And I think that's actually been pretty successful. I mean, we're only about a little less than a year into it, but I think you're seeing almost none of those anymore, because we have very clear language, and staff has delegated, responsibility to administer within those. If you wanted, in addition to trying to find, take a cut at some more black and white objective findings or basis for a decision, we could also come back, because remember, the funding levels can go both ways.
Right.
We could have ended up with zero funding for the new
We've
fiscal year.
had zero funding.
We've had zero funding in the
We've
past.
had zero
Right.
funding.
This
when
could
we
have broke
went
either way.
bankrupt.
So
Right.
the lucky person who got their application in,
Right.
instead of going, gosh, I should have waited, they would be saying, I'm glad I got it, because the person the next calendar day got zero. So this is not this goes both directions.
And I would just say before I have
Yeah.
to leave, unfortunately, that, so if there are 3 people who applied and didn't begin the work until after the July 1 date, we could say, what we intended in effect was to have this, new lateral grant level for work beginning after July
Where
1.
would you do that?
Right. So we can bring forth some clarifying language for future.
Oh, I thought you said 3.
No,
How many?
Can I just clarify, I'm sorry, I don't know if it pertains what Greg is gonna say, there were 3 people that applied between the June 18th and the July 1st date. There was more than a dozen that had not started their work yet. So he is special with 2 other individuals that applied after you approved it and before it was implemented.
So we total 4.
Total 3, right, the 2 others.
Besides-
We'll have to excuse
Go
ourselves.
with things, Mary.
Leave it all to you.
do you have some direction on?
Well, here's,
I leave it to the quorum. Okay,
You
thank
end up
you.
with the tiles. I'll call you some Rick.
so my suggestion to the board would be to have staff come back with some written findings that can be more consistent, a specific set of updated policy language that does, again, sort of like what we did with the rates, which provides some very more stringent and specific language about cutoff dates and so forth. We thought we had plenty, but there's always situations come up that we can't anticipate. And I think this was a little bit unusual. And you could consider that, and then you'd have, as to Jolie's points and concerns, at least you'd have a more solid basis, recognizing that no matter what you do, if you do allow this, you have some degree of risk going forward. That comes with the decision to allow any amount of retroactive funding. If we have consistent guidelines and findings going forward, you will minimize that risk, but you won't eliminate it.
But if we come back with a policy amendment that clarifies all of this, and we can put in that policy that for this specific time period, this is how we're going to handle it, and then it's in our policy, and you are enforcing the current.
But I think if you're going to do that, you need to notice those other people.
The 3 that are in that
Yeah,
window.
you've got to notice these other people.
Well, it's
And
noticed
so
on
we're looking at more costs that certain people got that others will not get.
I
Do
think
you know
we-
where I'm at?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I feel like I'm in this,
Okay, well,
it's
why don't you make a
like,
motion? I think
I'm
you've
not
got-
gonna make a motion.
I think also, in the future, perhaps on the contract that we sign, it should say, be aware, these are the rates as they are right now when you're signing.
From time to
It's
time.
like going-
And from
it's like
time to
going-
time, this may change, and
Well, I hate to say, it's like something being on sale. You can go shopping, sale's over, and how do you, sometimes, you know, I don't know, I just, we're a public agency, that's what makes it tough, right? What do you think around there?
Well, if it's 3, it's gonna be $4,500. Is that true?
That would be the maximum, Frank, yes, I think. Is that,
Yeah. No matter how much it is, they only get 4.
a total of 4?
Total.
Total 4.
But they will have to have at least spent $8,000
yes.
to get that
That's
Yeah.
right.
Correct.
for. If they only spent 7,000, they're not gonna get an additional 15. But Pam's right, Director Meggs is right. If we're gonna do this for one person, we should contact the other 2 who fell in that, that short window, that 12-day window, and tell them if they would like, who's not gonna apply for $1,500, I think we have to do that. If we're gonna do it for one, we gotta do it for all 3.
Yeah.
They've got to be consistent.
So, yeah, we'll bring it back and bring back also
So-
a policy
If
amendment.
Does that what
to-
staff wants to, I mean, the board wants to do? Do you want to send it back to?
I think I'd like to send it back, find out what they recommend with these 3, and also what we can do as part of this in the future to
And
make
get
this more
policy
solid,
amendment.
so that, like the connection issues, that we're likely not to have this again.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, and again, my heart says, yeah. And I'm just concerned about ramifications now and into the future, and maybe as part of this whole thing.
Well, it also, I think too, because this is not a foreseeable, we didn't see this coming, but clearly, the grant program is, it is public funds going out to private property owners for these improvements. It's all for very good purposes, but it is not an insubstantial amount of money. I think in the future, I'm just gonna throw this out as a lesson learned that I can communicate to staff about, is that we need to be exercising, a high level of sensitivity and discretion and not, making sure we go to a great degree to not convey any mixed signals. I mean, because these are substantial amounts of money.
Mhm.
And if people have a sense that the timing matters, I should do this, I should do that, we're going to see these kinds of complicated situations. I don't know that we can ever entirely avoid it. That's partly why I'm recommending we try to tighten up some of the language so that we at least can get the window as narrow as possible. But I think I kind of would also chalk this up probably to a lesson learned, where we were going from a low to a high. In the past, we've only gone from high to low to 0, and then we've replenished back to the current level.
Mhm.
So we've got a mix of varying situations, but I guess, I think we can tighten it up going forward, is my suggestion.
Okay, so just, if next year we have a similar situation, I guess my concern is that we could be called on to amend it again if the same thing happens. Anyway, I'll make a motion, to continue, item 9, consideration of customer request for retroactive lateral grants at 120 Crane Drive in San Anselmo, to have council look at potential findings to retroactively pay Mr. Silverberg the $1,500, so that the board can review
And a
new findings.
And a policy,
Potential new findings.
and also bring back an amended policy. I think we need both. Because then, in the future, we've got it, it's
Yep.
going to be real clear, and we will
Right.
address the time when it goes down, what happens when it goes, if it goes down, or when it goes to 0, and then we refill the, whatever you wanna say.
The coffer.
Well, when we get funds again, then we should probably address in that policy, putting people on the waiting list. Is that in the current policy, or
We don't have a policy, we have a program.
a program? Well, then we're
no resolution and no ordinance that.
We don't have a
adopted this
policy?
program. There's a program, it's under program block.
We've been talking policy for 30, 45 minutes. What
Right.
happened here?
I think I misspoke earlier, it's not,
It
Wendy was
is an
correct.
adopted program, but it was not adopted by resolution or ordinance.
That would be something we bring back and adopt.
And there may be, I guess, last consideration, as you guys know, we've got an agenda item for later that talks about future funding and also consideration of transition to other types of support or incentives. So it's possible in the future, depending on future board deliberations, you may not be worrying about grants in the future. We don't know, but just keep that in mind.
But the program is going to continue for years, we think, and so, yeah, it's great to work out the kinks in it. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to send it to attorney and staff. Okay,
Yeah,
and staff.
and bring back a policy. Turn the program into a policy.
Second, okay, second, any further discussion?
Just to add, that the policy and procedure at the standing committee could review that.
Is that committee still in
Policy.
existence?
Yeah, there's a policy, is that gone? Is that committee gone? Never mind.
It got morphed into finance and or HR.
Okay, so we've got a second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that'll come back in December.
I think you got what you want.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So
I'm not
we
sure
don't know
yet.
yet.
I'm not sure yet.
We're trying.
I just wanted to reiterate my concern over how some people were actually told and said, keep it confidential. I mean, that's not just alluding to the fact that it might be increasing next
That's not our plan, we're supposed to be able
So,
to.
that was my main frustration.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, next agenda item is agenda item 12, which we've moved up. Discussion and direction on reallocation of budgeted funds to continue the lateral replacement grant program for the current fiscal year in the role of a lateral loan program. Ray?
Okay, I will run through this briefly and try to hit a couple of the highlights. So, as a good segue from the immediately preceding discussion. So the district replenished the funding for the lateral grant program as part of the beginning of the new fiscal year, which started July 1st. And we also, in parallel with that, allocated a significant amount of funding for a new program called the Inflow and Infiltration Reduction Program, or INI Reduction Program. And we increased the funding, the maximum funding amount to $4,000. And we allocated $400,000 for the fiscal year for the grant program, based on, past levels of activity. And what occurred was we had started some new pilot programs in terms of public outreach to encourage the lateral replacements. And we had basically a convergence of circumstances where there was a growing awareness, I think, of the lateral issue overall and the benefits of the grant program. And then specifically, we worked with the city of San Anselmo to basically get out in front of upcoming paving projects to incentivize people to consider replacing their laterals. We talked about that briefly a moment ago. Specifically, we offered free CCTV inspections, and we had a lot of very direct outreach. So the result of that has been that in the first roughly 3 to 4 months of the fiscal year, we have actually expended all of the initial $400,000 in grant funds because of the high level of lateral replacement activity. There is an attachment to your staff report that I won't go through. I just think it has some very interesting facts and figures for you to look at on the aspects of the laterals, average costs, and also significantly, you can see that the huge majority of north of 80% of all of the laterals that were done in this period were done in the city of San Anselmo, and that was, we attribute it to a reflection of the outreach ahead of the paving project. But what that's resulted in is the financial decisions before the board this evening, which is what to do about the depleted grant funds. And when staff was looking at alternatives for this, we came back to sort of the original pools of money that this had sort of been associated with. And we said, well, you know, where are we seeing spending, where are we not seeing spending? And we have not been able to really jumpstart other aspects of our program, and specifically the, you know, things like the smoke testing, and then separate the sewer inflow reduction and gray water. And I kind of call it a pilot only because we've never had this before. But we've had monies available, and we have not really had an opportunity to jumpstart that program and get the monies moving. So we had suggested in the staff report reallocating funding from those two line items in the budget to put out an additional $450,000 for the grant program to carry us through what we think will be the next roughly, say approximately 3 to 5 months of activity, which we expect to continue to increase because of the outreach still going on in places like San Anselmo, and the high amount of paving that's going to be going on in Larkspur and San Anselmo and some of the county streets. Plus the passage and the effective date of the lateral ordinance, particularly as it relates to property transfers, which is January 1st of 2015. So we're anticipating a continual upward trend in the lateral replacement activity, and we would like to, we think it'd be very beneficial to continue to provide some financial incentives to support that, and ideally with a view towards bridging the window between now and when the district might be able to get in place a lateral loan program to supplement or replace the lateral grant program, because the loan program would be a little more self-sustaining, and it is a fairly new option that's available due to the passage of a new state law in 2012. So it's a fairly new idea. It's been tried in a few areas. And basically that's what's before you this evening. Now, to come back to the fund reallocations that we recommended, I recognize that there's you know, important considerations with those other programs, and we don't want to take away the opportunity to see those go forward if you know, the conditions changed and we had partners to jumpstart some of those. So we did address this in the staff report, but I want to offer this as a clarifying comment and consideration for the board in looking at your alternatives. There are several other places in the budget that we could allocate this replacement funding for the lateral program from. They're all in the capital program, and there are 2 or 3 line items that we do not expect funds to move significantly, and 2 of them are specifically there's a force main rehabilitation project that we don't expect to get to construction, and that had over $1 million in funding for this fiscal year, and that would be an appropriate place to reallocate funds as well. So as you consider your alternatives, keep in mind that it's not an either or. We suggested these sources of funds again because of the sort of the consistency they had with how we developed the budget back in the May-June run-up in 2014. But you have several alternatives in how you want to do this. I think what we're suggesting is the real priority is to make sure that we don't hit a gap in the funding and incentives for the lateral program, because we're really just now starting to see the increase that we've been trying to achieve. And there are huge benefits to this in terms of I&I reduction and improved service to the customers, reduction of sanitary sewer overflow risks, and so forth. So we really consider the I&I reduction program and the lateral replacement to be part of the core priorities of the district. And we are just now making a big push to get people to do those, so we think it's important to maintain the financial support. Okay, so that's what this item is about. We're looking for direction on the funding allocation to maintain the grants, and to be clear, we're not changing the grant amount. It's still $4,000 for the rest of the fiscal year. And we are looking for direction, if the board desires, to bring back to you a specific proposal for a lateral loan program, which would be eventually a self-funding program that we would seed initially with about $1 million or $1.5 million from the recently completed bond sale. And so with that, I'll hand it back to Board.
Thanks, Bill. The board will hold this, and then we'll take it out to the audience and then back to the board. But initially, I would think that we all agree that we want to fund the lateral grant program in an amount of $450,000, and that we're going to discuss where that money comes from in our budget.
Well, I think that we should just do our usual Rosenberg rules and not sort of project how all the board members are thinking
Okay,
and
well,
feeling.
then,
Because
board
I
members,
personally
are your
don't
comments?
always follow what everybody thinks.
Well, for myself, for the past 2 years, Ross Valley Sanitary District, partially in response to the cease and desist order that the state regional water quality control board put on us, came up with an innovative program to reduce the amount of wastewater that's flowing through our system that we have to collect, transport, pump, and then pay for treatment at CMSA. We could reduce the amount collected, it made sense. And so we were the first sanitary district in the Bay Area to actually put a program together like this. We had hoped MMWD would be our partner. We had hoped that we funded this program for $200,000 last year, begged MMWD to please help us run a rebate program. We funded for them. They have rebates for a number of water saving devices, and it was logical that they could run the program, add another couple features to it, and we would fund it because we had funds, and we were going to in effect reduce the wastewater at the source. MMWD just did nothing with it last year. We budgeted this year $250,000, again for our innovative program, that's for gray water systems for single-family homes and waterless urinals for public buildings, city halls, gymnasiums, the schools here, and the Ross Valley Sanitary, shopping centers, etc. You know, one waterless urinal saves 40,000 gallons of water a year, and the county of Marin, for instance, installed 23 at the fairgrounds, and those 23 waterless urinals save 920,000 gallons of water a year, potable water, and then that's 920,000 gallons less that Los Angeles Valley Sanitary District has to collect, transport, pump, and treat. So it was like a win-win for water districts and for our district. Well, MMWD this year, again, I've been over there a few times, I've met with staff. Oh, they said it's a great idea, but there just seems to be it's not high on their radar. For some reason, last night I asked, why are you leaving $250,000 on the table here? We're all in the same boat, and we're trying to work together, and you guys aren't helping us. They said they might send someone tonight, so and Kumar said he would call.
And we did,
Did he call today?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if maybe the board just didn't see that much of an incentive here to put together a program. We're finding the same issue with CMSA and the $150,000 grant we have for a wastewater study for looking at reclamation reuse of 11 million gallons a day of wastewater we treat at CMSA and dump it in the bay. MMWD just kind of slow on the uptake. It's just like, wow. In fact, if we could get an application in before December 31st, there's $800,000 in previous water money that's sitting up there, not unused in Sacramento, and it's got this deadline, December 31st. And MMWD could jump on that with CMSA. They're really slow on the uptake. So I would, I think this is a good program. I'd like to see it stay in effect. And then on the issue of the street paving, as you see the weather, street paving is about over for the rest of this year. They'll start again in late spring. I don't think we're going to need $450,000, but we're going to need some funds as as former council member Ann Bulver said, from San Anselmo, they've got some problems on their street, and they're gonna need some funding. So rather than taking a whole $450,000 from one of our programs, if we just get, you know, a nominal amount in there to continue this program, and we can take a look at it every couple of months to see how we're doing. But I would surely hope that we wouldn't, you know, in effect, raid that, our wastewater inflow and conservation program right now.
So far, we've done basically 130 in the first 3 months. And from what I read here, if we allocate 400, you know, we replenished it with $450,000, that will allow us to do approximately 140 to 150, even if we slow down until the spring and have 6 months. I suspect that's going to get eaten up pretty quick, especially starting in January 1st, when we have Ordinance 66, which says it's going to be required to do this as part of the sale of a house. I suspect that the idea that 450,000 is, you know, we don't have to do that much right now. I think with the number of sales that are happening in the Ross Valley, we're gonna use that up pretty darn quick, and probably be coming to ask for some more later. And so, as much as, you know, the I&I reduction programs and gray water systems that are in place now, from what I read, there's really not much happening on that, and, you know, we can certainly try and replenish those and redo them in the future, but it seems to me that this lateral replacement, which is for safety reasons, because people are spewing, if, you know, aside from stuff coming in, I&I, we're also spilling into streams, and it's a public safety with some of these very old things, that the more that we can do in the shortest amount of time, encouraging the public to do it with this lateral replacement, the better off we all are, and not to minimize any of those other projects, because they're all important, and this is a whole gestalt thing, but if nothing is happening with them because of either CMSA or MMWD, we certainly have a need to do our lateral replacements right now, and they affect us right now, especially from the safety thing, because I've talked to some of the people, some of our guys out in the field who said we just have, you know, lateral stuff flowing into the environment. The whole thing. I think the lateral replacement I see as being very important to keep funded, and we got the momentum going, and in the long run, it's certainly going to help the entire district, the environment, the county, the world. The universe. Maybe not the universe.
How about, we will get world peace.
World peace.
Okay, well, I always have questions, as you know. Jim. Jim is our bond counsel, is that your title?
Financial advisor.
So my question before I get into my thing is, with the bond money, can we do lateral replacement? Can we use bond money for lateral grant program?
Good question. I would say sure,
Yeah,
but, you know, I have to go back and check exactly
you're not sure.
what the indenture says about these.
The list of projects,
5%.
Yeah.
Well, it's,
We put a
you know,
million.
we create a lateral account, we know how much money we can use for this, for laterals. But if we said lateral loans,
Well,
we'll
not
have
loans.
to ask bond counsel whether we
Not
can make
loans,
grants.
I'm just talking lateral program.
Yeah, the money, there's $1,547,000 and some
And
change.
when is that bond money gonna flow into?
It's
I
already
think we
there.
have it already.
Okay, so we actually have some funds that we wouldn't necessarily have to pull our gray water systems. We could pull this other 200,000 from the bond money instead of taking away the gray water system.
Yeah, correct, and I guess I want to reemphasize that point, because I know the staff report didn't, I think we could have offered you a broader range of alternatives, to put it that way. We have other capital items in this year's budget that we don't anticipate spending now. We know that we're unlikely to get to them. So without even getting to the point of talking about the bond, pardon me, the lateral funds that were offshoot of the bond sale, a simpler, more direct approach, if the board's desire, when you are, at the end of this discussion, is to leave the gray water and wastewater reduction funds as they are, would simply be to reallocate funds from one of these other line items. And we have at least two good opportunities. Again, they're capital projects that we're very unlikely to achieve the level of spending projected. And we would just rebalance those going back into the new fiscal year when we adopt the next fiscal year's budget. So this is not a zero-sum game. I want to be clear. We may have inadvertently kind of construed it that way in the staff report. It wasn't the intent. There is every opportunity to maintain funding for the gray water and wastewater reduction program, and it's you have several options of how you want to do that.
So,
But if I do want to, just to be clear, we
didn't
want to
see
make
it,
sure we
so-
have funds for the grant, the lateral program as well. To Michael's point, I mean, that's kind of is a conclusion of the staff report.
okay. So we have 6 months left of our budget. We could take 250,000 from this money we just now discussed. We could leave the recycled money in effect, because I really think this district needs to step up to legacy and create one of the best sanitary districts in the county. And to me, this is a way to look at leadership and how we can continue to also look at the environment and safety. And saving on that treatment, I mean, it's a cost to the ratepayers. Basically, it boils down to extra cost to the ratepayers, would be saving. So, just go back to the questions.
You want to hear from the public?
No, wait, I'm almost done. So just quickly on how San Selmo got 81 grants, and all these Fairfax had 9. What happened there? Are you guys not gonna beating down the doors?
Well, yeah, there was and the short answer is actually yes, but not the district per se. It was just a very concentrated effort that was a mix of City of San Anselmo staff, district outreach, the free CCTV inspections. But the real takeaway from that, it just happened to occur in San Anselmo, and we really appreciate it. I've tried to touch on that in the staff report, because their city manager and staff have just been outstanding partners to the sanitary district. So I do want to make that plug. But the real takeaway from that is every one of our partner governments around here that owns the streets is at the beginnings of a major 5+ year push on paving. You guys know all this. They passed the sales taxes and so forth. We're already seeing that progress, that uptick start to occur. The county as well. Roughly 20 to 25% of our service area is unincorporated in Marin County, and their public works department has a heavy ongoing paving program. So the real takeaway is, if we're doing this right, we're getting out in front of our other government agencies' capital projects when it makes sense to get in and get the work done, and our customers are getting the opportunity to do that as well, if they're given the information and the incentives. And this was a pilot. We talked about this. I know this is a bit of an offshoot, but when you approved the free CCTV inspections, we did it with an eye towards these upcoming San Anselmo paving projects as a test run. We didn't know how it was going to work. That's why it was a test. Well, what we found was, maybe others won't be this successful, but it works pretty well when you let the customers know your road's about to be paved. If you touch it for the next 5 years, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Go get your sewer lateral looked at, and if it needs replacement, here's an opportunity to do that. So that turned out to be a very successful alignment of circumstances that we think we can replicate in other communities in Larkspur and Fairfax up and down our service area. Ross, yeah, there's nothing, this is very
Well-
repeatable.
And I hope that we will be very visionary because the water district looked up streets in Fairfax and we were not in the same boat.
Correct.
And that really made me
Correct.
really extremely mad.
And we are doing.
And I
our-
don't know what happened with that picture, but that's why I want to do that summit, is that we're not connected with the county and projects. But I agree with you, San Anselmo has been a success. I'm just hoping that our funds can reach out to all these cities. So anyway, I'm done.
Okay, I would like to say that I think our lateral grant program is one of our best programs. And I think we need to fund it to the maximum. And $450,000 is going to be enough for a while. But I agree, when the real estate sales kick in, we're going to be needing funds. And I think we don't have to do it at the, we don't have to eliminate our I&I reduction program or anything like that. We've got a delayed force main project that we're not going to be able to fund the full thing this year because it's not going to happen. We will fund part, maybe a little bit of it this year, it's into next year, and keep those other two programs on our books because I think if we can get MNWD working on it, that's great, because it looked very good, and it's a good program. So, that ends what I'd say, and now I'd like to hear from the audience, and if you'd like to speak to this. Yes, sir? Mr. Bradley?
Yes, thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I guess I'm here just to let you know that I think you will have a partner in MWD, and to keep the program going. It's a tremendous amount of water, potable water that you're going to be saving your treatment plant and also the district if you keep it going. And we do need to coordinate, like Pam said, that's extremely important. And, I will do my best to be liaison, assuming I'm sworn in the next few weeks. So I just would like to see you guys keep it going.
I think we need to approach it on all fronts.
Yeah, exactly.
Working on this, so, yes. Yes?
I just want to say I'm relieved to hear that the replacement is a priority and that there will be funding. I don't know how soon it will be available, but I've got an emergency situation that I'm going to have to proceed on and hope that I've already fulfilled the application and the paperwork, so I'm hoping that I can be reimbursed then after my work is done.
How does that work?
Yeah.
We are
it's the
keeping a
phone.
waiting list.
Okay, we'll keep the waiting list, so if it gets
And we will
refunded,
go-
if we get,
We will go to the waiting list people first, and depending on where they are in the process, just determines how easy they
How many are on the waiting list now?
How many, Danielle?
Maybe about 15.
How many?
15, and that's
15.
that's just in a week and a half.
And you're on the
Is it
waiting
San
list, you're
Anselmo?
within the top 15.
Am I on the list?
Yes,
Oh, great.
It's like number 10.
Okay, any other comments from the?
I have one more comment, and it's that I just want to compliment you on your staff. My experience has been really wonderful. I mean, people have been helpful and immediate, from Danielle and Fred, and then I had two people come because I had an overflow problem on Monday, and they just were so helpful. So I just want to bring that to your attention, because I think a lot of times it's not recognized. And when you're getting bad news, like having to replace a sewer, it's really helpful to have people that are conscientious and concerned and giving you good information.
What street was it?
Alder Avenue in San Anselmo?
Yeah, okay, good. All right, well, thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much. Any other comments from the public? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know Frank, you've done some outreach already. Maybe some kind of formal, or, I don't know, how to proceed with communication or liaison work to really get this program
With
going.
MMWD?
Yeah,
I
like,
appeared at the meeting last night, and the manager seemed to say, yes,
Okay.
we want to take advantage of it. The board seemed like very non-committal.
so maybe we need to set up a meeting
But
with Krishna.
if we have a new board member who's a little more inclined to,
What about the board president? Anyway,
You
I'm
didn't
just
say
saying that,
There were only 3 board members there
strike while the
last night.
iron's hot.
There were only 3 there.
Huh?
There were only 3 there.
Oh,
But let's get a vote, well, we're talking about the lateral
The lateral.
replacement program. Let's not concentrate on this for a while. And
So just, Tom, just for one detail, so if for your consideration, if we are going to take the lateral replacement grant funds from another capital project that we talked about, just for the record, that would be, it's item 23 in our capital table in the budget. You don't need to have that in front of you, but just for the record, there's $1,250,000 for this fiscal year for that item. And what that is, it's a rehabilitation of a force main that we seldom use. It's an old Techite force main, it's a bypass main by the Bon Air Shopping Center. And we don't anticipate coming anywhere near spending that $1.25 million. So if you were to take the $450,000 from that item for this current fiscal year, if we begin to make progress on that capital project, we'll replenish it, so to speak, going into the new fiscal year. So just so we're clear where the funds are coming from, I would offer that as the board as a specific resource of where the funds are coming from.
we're not giving up on that project, we're just,
No,
it's getting.
exactly.
postponed.
It's just a matter of timing. We go into the new fiscal year, we've passed the bonds. We are very fortunate to have all the available funding. This will be a matter of just updating the book, so to speak, going into the new fiscal year. And there does not be, nothing needs to be shortchanged this fiscal year. If an opportunity arises, we have the funds available.
Could we do it at 200, take 250,000 and see how far that takes
Oh,
us?
that's the board's discretion.
It's raining, there's not gonna be a street project done for a while here.
We will have, the
Starting
one
on
thing I do
January 1st.
is the,
So,
yeah,
what
the
you-
new consideration is the property sale transfer provision.
right, and we're gonna give them 6 months to accomplish that, right? We're talking about 6 months.
No, 60 days from close of escrow.
It's coming back, the ordinance, right? I'm suggesting 6 months rather than,
Anyway, I don't want to, that's a slightly different topic, but I mean, that would be your discretion if you wanted to start with 250 and see how things went. Our staff's sense is this is for the rest of the fiscal year. And if you look out through the rest of the fiscal year, based on current activity, there's almost no question we'll spend the monies on the
I don't
grant.
think
I mean, you're welcome to do it in 2 steps, but I think we can say with a high degree of
The
confidence.
money's there now, we're not.
So, while we're talking about laterals, we just had a report at our last meeting that talks about how we're sucking bay water in over here at the Larkspur Boardwalk and Larkspur Marina.
Mhm.
Perhaps we need to do some lateral inspections in the Larkspur
Mhm.
Boardwalk area.
Right.
Maybe we can voluntarily go ask the folks if we can
Sure.
come in and inspect their laterals, because that looks like major problems for
Take that
us.
as priority.
We need money to do that, though.
Okay.
I'm in favor of $450,000 for this program. And I'm willing to substitute the force main funding, because it's gonna be delayed anyway, but I don't know why we want to shortchange this.
So we can move on, I'd love to make a motion at
Please,
this point.
make a
Wait, I'm gonna
motion.
add a friendly amendment, because this.
Wait, he's gonna make a motion. Then you can-
I would motion at this point that we approve moving $450,000 from item number 23, which we subtract 450,000 out of 1,250,000, which is a force main that's currently a bypass that we're probably not gonna get to this year.
Correct.
And we can fund later with the capital improvement from next year. So from item 23 to the lateral grant program, and direct staff to begin developing a loan program for consideration in January of 2015.
Is there a second?
Wait, so where is so as part of that 450, the 250 for gray water
No,
system?
no.
Taking,
You're
450,000
leaving it there.
only out of item 23, and leaving everything else as
The
is
gray
for
water.
the time being, yes.
All right, and, I just as a point of order, when we're putting in the loan, we're kind of adding a separate entity in some way. I know we're just, and it kind of confuses the whole, subject.
That would be a different motion.
You know what I'm saying?
We're-
Yeah.
I do.
We're not saying that we're gonna implement it, we're saying that beginning in January, to begin developing such a program.
Sorry.
You want to put
Just-
that in your motion?
Yeah, it's right here. And I think as part of this whole, because I think that'd be lovely if we eventually had a self-funding lateral grant program. That can feed itself, the state revolving.
I just think a loan program's a totally different thing.
Well, it
from a
is,
grant.
but there are
So I
two
would just
items in
ask
this
if
program.
staff could maybe separate it out for two motions in the future.
For two motions, it isn't
In
staff,
the
it's the
future,
board.
in the future.
Well, in the future.
So we have a motion on the table to fund the lateral replacement program in an amount of $450,000 and to begin development of a lateral loan program and to fund the increase in the lateral program from our substitution item 23, a force main replacement project. Is there a second? I second the motion.
So,
Discussion?
Just discussion, can we contact the other cities and towns in the district that we worked with San Anselmo
Mhm.
basically earlier in the year. We contact Fairfax, Ross, and Larkspur.
Absolutely.
And make the same program available to them, so.
We actually did. We did.
And they didn't take advantage of it?
They didn't do the same, towns and counties and cities didn't do the same outreach that San Anselmo did. We still did really aggressive outreach to the homeowners. There was just a lower response rate just because there was, less community knowledge about it. So this is kind of showcasing a really great, what happens when people work together, agencies work together. We want to use this as a model to take to other towns and say, look what happened over here. And then hopefully get that same sort of support with Fairfax and Larkspur and Ross and all them.
Yeah, so I think, Frank, so first of all, we absolutely do want to try to replicate the success, and we know each of the local municipalities has the paving programs because of all the needs for the streets. So what I think we're anticipating doing is sort of taking the results that the San Anselmo experience illustrates and then do the outreach to Public Works at Larkspur, Fairfax, Ross, and so forth, and then we've got a demonstratable example of what we're talking about. So we want to see this replicated as much as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, there's a motion on the floor, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, good. Motion passes.
Can we have a break, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's be back. We did. Be back at 8:45. Okay, we've got a couple agenda items that we'd like to pull up. I'd like to do agenda item 10 next. Progress report on the 2014-15 Human Resources Work Plan by Regional Government Services. And Greg, we have a representative from Regional Government Services here.
Yes.
So,
I do not really have an introduction to this. I mean, you have a very brief staff report. We wanted to bring you this presentation at this board meeting, just recognizing that we're a good 4 months into the current fiscal year, and there's a lot going on within the HR realm of the district. And we just felt it was important to bring you sort of a check-in, let you know what's happening, how things are going, lessons learned, observations, and so on. So there's no decisions before the board this evening. This is an informational update. It's an opportunity for you to hear from Sophia and myself, mostly from Sophia, on what they're doing on HR. And you have an opportunity to ask questions and so on, looking ahead between now and the end of the current fiscal year. It's been quite a learning experience for all of us, and this was a plan, and of course it's being running smack into reality, or however you want to put that. And the district has a very long history and a deep-seated set of HR-related challenges that we're trying to address. So this was an ambitious program that we started, when we launched this initiative, and we're not done yet by any stretch. So this is just a midpoint check-in, and it's a discussion only, no decisions this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sophia.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, you know me, I'm Stephanie Salfano, Regional Government Services. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down to do this because my vision is terrible and I can't see from that far away. Okay. So let me move on here to our next slide, which is a just brief recap of our time together. We did partner with the district in August 2013 and have been working with the staff of the district since then. We presented to you in April of 2014 in needs assessment based on the time that we had spent since August working with staff. And in that needs assessment, we incorporated a roadmap, what we call a work plan, for 12 months of activities targeted at achieving particular objectives in the district. And in June, the board adopted a contract for 12 months for us to continue our work with the district. So, we're going to take a look at what we've done in the 12-month period, but before we do that, I want to talk about the framework for the work that we're doing. You recall in the organizational needs assessment, we talked about the workplace values that your manager has brought to the district and that we have been working with him since January and training the staff on and really articulating and surfacing. Oh, thank you, what a brilliant solution, you are so good.
4 years of engineering school.
Love it, obviously I need engineering school.
Sophia, do we have this in our packet?
You do not have that. You have a report which has a little more detail, and I'm going to refer to that as we go, and then we can talk about it.
Well, we do have this, it's right here.
You have the values listed in the report, yes. I'm just kind of recapping in a slightly different order some of the highlights. So these workplace values have become a real core of both the work that we're doing and the way that we're approaching the work. And we're finding that staff are responding very well. They believe in those values. They are working to incorporate them in the way that they interact. The HR action plan objectives that we talked about in our assessment were to develop skills and systems to support the Ross Valley Sanitary District's workplace values. That's a very broad objective. We talked about clarifying roles and enhancing communication at all levels. There had been, as you know, some breakdowns in the organization that were causing us some challenges. We talked about developing and applying teamwork skills at all levels, and that's a really critical step. It's part of the value system that we're embracing. It's also part of best practices of any organization to work in a teamwork way. We talked about aligning HR administration practices with the values. We talked about designing selection and performance feedback tools that strengthen the values alignment, so hiring the right people who are aligned and making sure that the folks who do work for us remain aligned because we remind them what those values are. And we talked about developing a long-range plan for staffing and succession needs. We also talked in that report about some needs the employees identified. And these are the people that we're here for, so it's kind of important to keep in mind what they said to us they need. They need clear information to carry out their daily work. They need to understand the big picture, the long-range plan. Where are we going? So that it makes some sense what we're doing every day. They need visible principled leadership. That's just a key thing for them. They need a positive work experience. They've had some rough years, and I think they're looking forward to things being better.
Did you contact all employees, all 38, so even the rank and file who do the menial tasks, were they included in that?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so
Yes.
all 38, do a survey of employees or how?
So Greg, those came out of Greg's meeting with, you had 2 meetings, I believe, with all
Yes,
staff.
Yes, yeah.
And asked them, you have a stack posted somewhere from that, to talk about things that were important to them in the workplace, both projects, systems, and stuff that they wanted to see happen. And these were some of the HR type things that I extracted from that information that Greg gathered from the staff that speak to what HR does in an organization.
Okay, so there was no anonymous employee survey that they could answer questions?
No, and in some ways I'm kind of sorry we didn't do that. You know, it would make a nice baseline of comparison for where we stand now, but it is what it is. Okay, so out of that, look at all those objectives and needs, we identified 6 actionable projects, and those were captured in the work plan table that you may recall from that report. We talked about developing and using a performance management system, revising, updating, and creating administrative policies and systems, creating and implementing training plans, preparing business case and strategy for our 2015 labor negotiations, implementing ideas from the staff planning workshop, that's the one we just spoke about, and developing a long-range staffing plan. So where are we? Well, we feel like we've made a good start. We have taken specific steps with regard to all of the objectives identified, and in the report that's attached to the board agenda, I did itemize for you specific things that we have done in regard to each of those 6 projects. We have also learned a lot. We started peeling the onion. And we're learning things about the layers that are underneath. We're also learning things about the staff. Because this is not a Sophia and Annie show. This is not RGS comes in and imposes something on Ross Valley. This is Ross Valley's system. And the staff of Ross Valley are the people who are going to make it work. So we have been learning about those people and what they need and what they're skilled at and how they communicate and how they think. And we're positioned to work better with that team to take all of these things and move them forward as a result of that. Another good piece of news is our expenditures are on target. The October bill that just came to you just broke $59,000. That's a third of the way through the year, 4 months in. The budgeted amount is $200,000, so I think we're really expending what we thought we would expend. We do have some course corrections to make. We have run, as Greg says, with our best laid plans headlong into reality. We are still on target. We do think that we need to resequence or reprioritize some actions and lengthen some timelines. I'll talk about the reasons for that in just a minute. We have found that there is some variation between plans and on-the-ground implementation that happens when we involve other people. You know, the work plan was the brainchild of 2 people essentially, but getting it done is going to be the brainchild again of all of the people at Ross Valley, and will help facilitate them through that process. So as we're involving others, we're getting additional opinions and additional questions, and we are finding some variation. I want to remind you this isn't a surprise. We talked about the work plan. We talked about the flexibility that was going to be needed. We talked about the fact that this was a really ambitious program, and we knew we were going to run into things that would cause us detours. Detours aren't always bad. They get us where we want to go, and maybe in a way that keeps us from having a big crash or falling in a giant pothole. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, some contributing factors to the course correction. As we've been peeling back the onion, we've been discovering that some of the systems and structures are more tenuous than anticipated. And I can give you an example of that. We recently were working on a religious observance accommodation policy for the district in compliance with the law that says people who have religious needs should be accommodated to a reasonable extent within business necessity. And as we were talking to the management team about implementing that, we kind of got into the question of when can you say no, which led us to the question of minimum staffing, because that would be a reason to say no, and what is that actually, and how do we know where do those numbers come from? And, you know, we are going to need to meet and confer with the union over a question like minimum staffing, because that is a working condition issue. So you can see that it unfolds as we get into it. I think we come up with a better answer if we dig down to the right level and find what we really need to use as a starting point. But, you know, when you look at the policy and you say, okay, there it is, I just need to tweak it like this, and then you start talking about how you implement and you find out, well, actually, we need to go back to the beginning a little bit and look at some of the underlying operational practices. It sounds like a good policy, and it sounds like a little tweaking would actually work, but there's been a disconnect. The policies are old, and the organization's been running, and they haven't been keeping up, so there is that disconnect that we're discovering, and we're trying to reconnect. It takes a little time. Employee skills development needs are extensive. We have good people at the district, and I don't want to imply otherwise, but working collaboratively and in team environments, which is really part of the values we're trying to incorporate and part of what makes an organization really effective, requires some very outstanding communication skills, some very different ways of approaching decision making, than people are necessarily accustomed to. So we've been spending a lot of time in that area of employee skills development so that people can work together to make good decisions, implement good policies, put good procedures out there, and have the system integrate in a way that makes sense for all of the stakeholders. Culture change and collaborative processes, they do take time. Buy-in is critical to success. You can't make people collaborate. And you can't make them think differently about things. You have to show them the value of that, and you have to help them do it, and bring them to a point where they are voluntarily participating. And I think that's happening, but it does take some time, and we do have different degrees of participation at this point. The district also needs to acknowledge its labor partner, which is the union, AFSCME, and continue to build this collaboration. I think that relationship, when I came to the district in 2013, had been neglected at best, and perhaps they had been snubbing AFSCME at worst, and there is some rehabilitation that's been going on with that. It's a fact of life in public sector organizations that we have labor unions, and they're going to be part of the way we do business. And honestly, the union, except for the paid business agent, is our employee. So of course they're part of the way we do business. We want them on board. That's been a little bit of a challenge because of the nature of labor relations, which is traditional and adversarial, and to bring that partnership to a point where we can be more effective and productive together is a work in progress. Okay, we believe that this is an important continued investment in human resource management function. Dozens of studies. I was actually surprised. I did a little bit of research to put this PowerPoint together. How much data there is out there on the team improvement to an organization, the incredible increases in productivity, the reduction in error rates, the reduction in project costs, the huge jumps in customer service satisfaction. And those were done in many cases in manufacturing environments, so fairly objective counts of productivity and cost reduction, not some of the mushier surveys of how do you like these people. Studies also show that changes in organization structures, and that's the things that we're working on, job roles, hierarchies, policies, sorry, typo there, and performance feedback are essential to sustaining the successes of a collaborative culture. So you can't just come in and say, hey, let's collaborate, the Herb says it's a great idea, and then you walk away. You have to rebuild substantially the way your organization looks and operates and functions and relates to each other in order for that to continue, or you just have a short little stipend, it's all good, and you're not there anymore. So I want to say at this point, thank you to you for supporting our efforts and supporting the organization in improving. Thank you to the staff at Ross Valley, those in the room. Thank you very much. You've been great to work with. Everybody who's not here has also been great to work with, but I'm glad they're not here because we put enough time for work. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all to make Ross Valley an outstanding organization. So that's the end of my presentation. I did want to note the next steps, which are in the report that you have in front of you. I'm sorry, my computer is logging out, so I have to log back in to see my document. And this is a level of detail I think is important that I put out there before I go to taking questions. We anticipate that we will continue with the work plan activities as described, with increasing engagement with district managers, because it isn't just an annual survey show, and with the following course corrections. We have done some work with the long-range staffing project, and I know that's really important to the members of the board to figure out what is the future of the organization in terms of quantity and type and cost. What we discovered is that we lack a little bit of a benchmark. When we say to the managers, help us envision the future of what the organization looks like, it's important for them to say, okay, if the organization is going to be these specific things or achieve these specific outcomes, then I can tell you what you need to get there. and Greg and I think, we were talking about this, and I think we had an example of like a root intervention program. You know, if you want a dynamite root intervention program, that's what you guys tell staff you want. They can tell you, okay, it's gonna take 3 staff of this amount and this many dollars to get that done. If they don't know you want a root intervention program, it's difficult to say, well, gosh, we think we need a root intervention program with 2 people or 3 people or whatever. So Greg and I talked about the strategic planning effort that's coming up and the outcomes of that being the most appropriate way for staff to come back around and say, okay, the board wants these things over a 5-year window, which is pretty typical for strategic planning, then this is what we can tell them based on our knowledge, our experience, industry standards, whatever research we need to conduct, it will take to get us there. So we're deferring that for a little bit until you have an opportunity to engage in that strategic planning and give us a common focus for everyone to look at and say, okay, here's how we move forward to get that. And then I had talked in my initial work plan about sort of some timeline benchmarks. And because of what I have been discovering in collaborative implementation with the team and also in working with the union, who does need to be our partner and be on board with many of the things we're doing. And people are busy, and the union business agent isn't here every week, is that we have kind of a backlog of things in process at various stages of development that we aren't implementing yet because the stakeholders who need to be part of that haven't been able to be engaged. So I am concerned that we continue to make progress and be able to measure progress, and that Greg has good information about what we're doing and how it's happening, and if it's not happening, why it's not happening. So I am suggesting that we use the formation of action plans for a number of the projects that we have going on with specific steps, timelines associated with that, associated stakeholders, and, you know, as a stakeholder group, go through and say, this is when we'll do the next thing, this is when we anticipate doing the thing after that. You know, if it's a policy and we all need to do input by this date, then we'll do that, and then we'll forward it to Greg for review, and Greg will get it back to us, and we'll get it to the union, so that we really aren't letting anything get away from us in the busyness of the days of our lives. And I think that's a useful benchmark to really look at, are we making the progress we want to make? Are we staying on track? Are we staying on target? So that's a tool Annie and I are putting in place right now with the things that we are working on. We are continuing to develop improved policies and procedures using collaborative methods. It takes a little longer, but I think it gets us a better outcome. It certainly gets us the buy-in that we want for everyone to follow the policies and procedures that we have. And then finally, you know, where we are discovering that people are struggling with the new culture, we are now in a place that we believe we understand well enough what we want the behaviors of the new culture to look like, and that's part of the performance management system that we have outlined, and that Greg is working through a pilot program with us to be able to provide some very focused attention to people who need more skills development or more understanding of what that looks like and how participating in the new values is going to work. So we do have an action plan moving forward. It's still going to keep us going on with the work plan activities. We're going to approach it slightly differently. And the one change that I think is really substantial to the projects is the long-range planning and deferring that to the strategic planning process with the board has happened. So I am happy to take questions if you have anything about what's in the report or just in general about human resources.
Well, I was wondering, how is this going to extend longer than your work? Do you think it's going to take longer than we had anticipated?
I don't know that we'll finish everything in 12 months. I think we'll make significant progress. I hope that if we aren't done with everything in 12 months, we've set it on course well enough that if we decided not to keep us, the staff here could keep things moving forward. You know, we believe that HR is an integral part of the organization. Obviously, we're HR people, and we think there's certainly plenty to do in any organization, and we would hope to continue to be a partner with the district, but, you know, that's certainly not a guaranteed outcome.
So this is a mid-year progress report. Is it mid-year or quarterly?
Well, we're a
Because
third of the
we-
way into the year, so
Because
it's-
the board had asked for quarterly reports. I was the one. I remember. So is this when did this start? When did you actually?
Well, so remember, there's really been two parts. They started initially roughly in about, really got going in about October of 2013 under an initial contract. We basically did a 1 year, what we're talking about now with this work plan that Sophia was referring to and all the 6 major objectives and so on. That was reflected in the 1 year contract that began approximately with the new fiscal year, which was July of 14. So we're basically about a third of the way into the scope of services and the objectives and everything that were in the new RGS contract. And you are correct, I think I do recall the quarterlies. This is, I guess, the closest thing, but it's obviously a little bit more than a quarterly because we're about a third of the way into the year.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I did go to Africa right at the quarterly time, and that was inconvenient on me. I apologize.
So I really need a copy of the timeline that you gave us when we awarded the company $200,000. So I can kind of see, because you had all these things that you wanted to achieve by certain months, by a certain time.
We did, and
But I'll ask for it tonight, and I don't know what happened, but it helps me kind of visualize what's been done and what hasn't been done so that we don't get to the end of your contract and maybe 50% is only done. For me, I need to see that. It's a great narrative report with, you know, topics and strategies, but I can't measure a lot of things for me. I just, it's too generalized, and
Yeah,
I'm concerned,
hear
I'm a
your
little
request.
worried
Yeah.
that, because I know we need to get certain things done,
Right.
and so I'm not sure, but,
Yeah,
so that's my little,
Yeah, I'll send that, you guys have seen that in past documents, but of course it's embedded like in the work plan and so on, so what I can do is just pull that out from the document it lives in, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, but I think there's just like a big table, Sophia, that has the 6 tasks.
6 projects, 3 months.
It has the
4
months
pages.
across, and it's somewhat, I want to say qualitative, because a number of these tasks, they essentially extend across most of the period, because we expected them to just we didn't think they would get done in 6 or 8 or 10 month periods, so they kind of show across the whole thing. But I will cut that out, or work with Sophia to sort of take it out of the document it lives in and provide that separately to the board. And Pam, to your point, and Sophia and Annie, you both heard this from me, because the board's concerns with these types of services we've understood. So we have talked about, making sure that their invoices, for example, now show a breakdown of where the labor time is going by those tasks. They are doing that.
okay.
I have communicated to Sophia and Andy the importance of us being able to show good project management, scope, schedule, budget are aligning. They've heard that, they've been responsive to it. But again, I apologize because you did make that request to me. I didn't quite get it what you were referring to, and I should have. It's that table.
Yeah,
And I
the
can
table.
cut that out and I'll
Yeah.
provide that to you.
What is CWEA training?
California Water Environment Association. It's the statewide wastewater industry group.
Okay, and then I kind of did an overview on the training that's occurring. It appeared that a lot of it was at the supervisor level, and I couldn't get an understanding or a feeling for the guys that are really on the ground. So, could you comment?
Well, I
Do you know what I'm
can,
talking
yeah,
about?
certainly, absolutely, and
So
I'll comment and the
yeah,
others can chime in. So, the staff have heard this before, so when Annie got here, I've been a big proponent of training and encourage people to, but I was more focused on like what you might call technical and job training. That was sort of what I was plugging, like, make sure you get out to CWA events and go get your certifications. And that's been going on. I think that's been going on to probably the highest level, I think, or certainly a high level relative to the past. What has been supplemented with what this effort is bringing is more people skills, internal organizational
Yeah, that's
skills,
what I was looking
supervision,
for.
communication, conflict
Yeah.
resolution. And that's where, those are the additional trainings that have been being
Okay.
brought to the supervisory levels and so forth. And there's been like, I think they're either weekly or every other week with kind of the mid-level supervisors.
It's probably more like once a month.
About once a month, okay, but they get together at Kerner with all the core people that are running the crews in the field and so forth. I don't participate in those, those guys run it, but these are much more workplace development type training, so there's two levels going on.
But you do have a staff meeting with everybody,
Yes,
right?
once a month, all of the staff
Okay.
meet, and that's just something we started when I first got here.
Let's see. So I didn't quite, systems and structures are more tenuous than anticipated. I didn't follow that at all. What do you mean?
For instance, and when you're gonna borrow from your shop, we discovered that there was practice of people wanting to take care of other people who had emergency or catastrophic issues, and that there had been some accommodation of that in the payroll function of the organization, but not a,
Benefits section.
yeah, but not a written down policy of how that works.
What did you say?
Benefits, it does not result
It doesn't
directly in
really-
a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's, somebody would want to transfer, if they have an abundance of vacation or sick time and somebody is struggling with something, they will say, can we give them, can I give them 40
Donate.
hours of mine?
And that's a very common concept, but without a articulated policy, you run into tax issues for employees. You can certainly run into inequity issues, which may.
I do it in general, where I work as a
Right.
nurse, yeah, so it's not,
No, it's very common.
Yeah.
But they had a system that they understood in their heads. It wasn't articulated, and that's a very, well, it's fragile for one thing, and not everybody knows the deal, but it's also fragile because it hasn't been really thought through and articulated so that it can be done correctly and fairly. And, when you start seeing inequities, people start looking for reasons for inequity, and that's where we end up with discrimination complaints and things that we really don't want to have, because that's not, I think, anyone's intention, but, when you look at the pattern, it's like, well, these people got something and these people didn't, and why was that? So, when you have a system that is sort of agreed to, sort of understood, but not really called out, that's a very fragile system. And, to the extent that we came into the organization, there's an employee handbook, there's an MOU, there's policies. This looks good, like, okay, they need updating, but we can do that. And as we, again, peel back the onion and start looking at how it's actually playing out on the ground, we're discovering a variety of other things of varying degrees of stability and strength. And so we're kind of going back and rebuilding some of those foundations, not because they're bad ideas, but because they can be better ideas and they will support additional ideas.
so how are you what is the training like for teamwork?
What's the training like for teamwork? We don't have a formal class on teamwork, but we are facilitating conversations between people who cross-staff on teams so that they understand how that sharing works. We're facilitating conversations of supervisors with their teams so they understand how to talk to each other in a way that promotes an effective relationship rather than resistance and non-compliance. How to include people in decision making. I mean, we can hire smart people. The public sector uses merit selection processes to get good folks, you know, but if we just top down give them orders and never include them in that process, we're missing out on something. So it's a skill to take ideas from the team and to be able to meld those together. And where you need to not use an idea to be able to effectively tell someone, we can't do that right now.
Well, I know in institutions, there's usually some kind of framework or system that's used on how you teach teamwork and how you evaluate it, and if it's working and all that. Because I know the staff, especially the guys on the ground, everybody's been through a horrendous amount of stress. So I was just wondering, how are we addressing that? Because you're talking about this new culture and this action plan. So I was just wondering about how much support are we doing? Because that was one of the key things that I was really hoping would happen.
So, you know, I think there are a couple of fundamentals that need to be in place. Just sort of basic workplace civility is important, you know, until we've achieved that. And I do think we've made a lot of progress in that area. We can't really talk about collaborative decision-making processes and roll out a model on that. It's not that we don't have a lot of information on that. It's not like I could teach a curriculum on it tomorrow. But we've been working really on communication skills, how to effectively get information transferred between people. Again, that's a precursor to collaborative decision-making. If you can't articulate your thoughts in a way that receivers understand and that you haven't generated some negative consequence unintended because you didn't consider what you meant to say and to whom you meant to say it, what it was about, then again, we can't really get to that last stage, which is the actual collaborative decision making and a team truly pulling together. So we are working on those. We are doing a lot of coaching style training of real life situations. A class is a wonderful thing. And we have had some supervisors go to some classes and they bring stuff back to the organization and help them apply it. But that's really critical, that you take the theory and you apply it on the ground, you practice those habits, because hearing in the room, if you never do it, doesn't do us any good. And sometimes it's difficult to take something that you've learned and turn it into real life. And so we're finding that it's really very helpful for us to say, okay, outline what you want to say to this person, and then say it to me, and I'll tell you how it makes me feel, and I'll tell you what might make me respond a little differently.
Do we have an employee assistance program?
We do.
Okay. How are we evaluating? Is the staff evaluating RGS, or how are we doing that? Is it up to the board?
Oh, in terms of how their work is going?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not a formal evaluation process.
Okay,
mean,
I
we're-
didn't know.
Yeah, we're, like any professional service, we're kind of continually gauging how things are going. If I have concerns or issues or problems, I immediately, bring those. We meet weekly, maybe that was something worth mentioning. Wednesdays are kind of the standing HR days at the district, so Annie and Sophia are usually on site for most of the business day every Wednesday. And so that's when a lot of these meetings occur. But my main point of mentioning that is there's a very high level of communication going on. And that's going on every business day, usually via email and the phone, but Wednesdays are the focus day. So in general, we are able to address any issues or concerns that are coming up in terms of how this work is proceeding pretty much right as they come up. And there's some current, examples I could give you where we felt like maybe we could improve coordination on some specific tasks between folks that are involved in HR items, and we've just said, oh, hold it, okay, there's an issue, let's talk about it right now. Let's figure out how to improve it. So it's a very much right-away feedback type of, situation.
I think to the extent that employees are providing evaluation, no one has asked them formally for that, and we haven't done as saying any kind of more morale survey, but what we are hearing from employees is that they really see a difference and feel a difference and have more trust in the actions of managers in the workplace and in their ability to get their problems resolved promptly and effectively. And I just have to share this, I got a really nice roundabout piece of input from the ASME representative. We were Greg asked me to go to PERC to do a settlement conference on the unfair labor practice charge, which we did successfully resolve, but the PERC attorney came and told me that the union had been saying that things were going really well at the district, since we had come in and started helping with HR, which, given, the nature of that union relationship, I thought was speaking very well of the impact that we can have.
Well, I would really like to see a safety, safety is like number one, to do a survey with the employees. How do they see their job as being safe?
Okay.
If they're out there.
Yeah, we have,
really need to
totally
do
separate from,
Yeah.
largely separate from what RGS's efforts are.
Uh-huh.
The district has a whole different, professional safety program that has a mix of internal
Uh-huh.
resources and some external, industry resources. We have a fellow named David Patzer that we contract with. So I guess kind of different, separate conversation, but the short answer, Pam, is we have, weekly, regular trainings, tailgates we call them, and then essentially a never-ending, ongoing series of retrainings on all the critical,
But I mean,
field issues.
I mean anonymous, to do a safety survey anonymous.
To see how people feel about the workplace safety?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
I mean, only because I have a place where we have to do that, we do morale, we do teamwork, we do
Yeah.
all the stuff about the institution.
Yeah.
That safety in this business to me is kind of
Oh,
vital.
it's very, very.
And they may not
absolutely.
tell you in a meeting.
Yeah, okay. No, so
So,
actually,
yeah.
maybe what I'm hearing more broadly is that, in addition to safety, but are there regular opportunities for employees to feel, to have an opportunity to provide feedback and do so in a way that they feel they can be honest?
Yeah,
and,
it really, I
upfront?
think.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think it would help the
Okay.
district.
Okay.
I'm done.
Any other comments?
Well, we budgeted 100,000 for the first year, and I think we supplemented, but was it 25,000 at the end of the year? We added to
Yeah,
get through the
it ended
fiscal
up being
year.
about 25 that we actually had spent, right, yeah.
And then the second year, we budgeted 200,000, that's what we're doing right now. Ultimately, we're gonna end up with some HR model, I'm not sure what it's gonna be yet, but our options are, our own HR employee here, who would be a paid employee, on staff, perhaps sharing an HR person with another local government agency who's got
Right,
some room to take on some additional workload, or continuing with an outside consultant. I guess that's kind of like the three options, I think.
I think so, yeah.
And so I'm hoping that towards the end of this fiscal year, we're gonna have a better idea as to where we might be going with
Yeah.
HR activities for Ross Valley. And I'm not sure which is gonna be the best model, but that's what I'm hoping to glean out of, with the information you're providing us. Ross Valley, I came on the board end of 2010, but it's like Ross, we grew like almost by 50% in employees in a short period of time, really fast. And I don't, we probably grew a little too quickly because people were coming on board and there was no overall program for how this whole thing was going to be managed by what. I mean, it just seemed a little scattered at my time. It was relying mainly on the manager, the GM, general manager. And obviously, with a workforce of 38 people, a general manager can't manage 38 people. So, but anyway, so hopefully this is all going to work out. And in the end, it's going to save us money. We had a lot of personnel actions, and we were paying our attorneys a lot of money because of the personnel actions we were running into. Employees were leaving, people were being fired. The board didn't know people were being fired; they were gone. So there's a big sea change here at Ross Valley, and obviously it's going in the right direction. But the board's going to have to, at some point here, take a look at the cost versus the benefits
Right.
and see what model we're gonna end up with.
Right.
And I'm not sure which one of the three is gonna be.
Right. And I do think to that point, Frank, about what is that future model. So first of all, I think the three options you identified are, I would agree with them. I think those are the three when we started this whole process, we said, well, this is where we can end up. And I just, my sense now that we're this far into this process is that the district's ability to reliably or confidently pursue any one of those is going to really benefit from, and I would almost say be dependent on getting through the work that's going on right now, because it's resolving a lot of these immediate, acute needs, and it's getting the district, ideally, we're not there yet, but it's getting it to a state where it could reasonably be sustained on the HR front with a lower level of resources or with a cooperative arrangement with another agency or what have you. And I think I will say, this is, my own professional view, we clearly want to avoid the model of a dedicated full-time internal HR person. And I think that's strictly a factor of the size of our organization. Now, for us to function well with essentially a part-time outside contracted service or with a partnered service, either one of those, I think, the success of those will hinge on the district getting to essentially a state of health or a state of, in terms of culture and practices and good systems and policies and so on.
All in place.
Right, that allows us to kind of be sustaining, and I know that's achievable, because I've been in organizations and you see it all around you. We've been through a very rough, patch, we've gone through a lot of changes. I think those options haven't changed, that's still where we eventually head to, and I really feel strongly that this is basically the stepping stones to kind of get us to either one of those.
Any other comments from the board? Thank you very much.
When you come back with the next report, can I get, first of all, can you get that timeline to me?
Yes.
The current one, and just check off what you think is done?
Okay.
And then for the next report, have it in the year. Because it helps us kind of figure out where we're going. And if you're gonna do an anonymous survey with staff, would be nice. Thanks.
I will, just because Sophia made reference to it, and it was an item that I didn't specifically pass on to the board, but just a good example. We did have a long-running open unfair labor practices charge. It resulted out of it started as a pretty minor, I would call it relatively minor, and it's been out there unresolved for I don't know, 8-9 months now. It's taken a long time, a year and a half. So it didn't go away, and I'll provide you a more thorough update in the future, but I apologize for not doing this, but they just attended the informal hearing about 2 weeks ago or a week ago. I forget the time, maybe it was October, but we reached a very reasonable resolution, with the union through the informal process. Once we did get the PERB officer and got their time, Sophia and the person from Lever Cassidy attended. And my main point mentioning it is that, we've been successful in avoiding new issues coming up, and the outstanding old issues have slowly been getting put to rest. And I think that was a good example, where that one, in the right type of environment, that item never would have gotten to where it was, first of all, that was clear. And secondly, the fact that it got brought to resolution with, I think, what both parties feel are some pretty reasonable, a very reasonable outcome, is a good tangible indicator of what we're getting done with this process. Because I know a lot of what we're talking about sounds kind of vague in general, and they've heard me say this many times, because I like, show me the list. And the list is quite not that concrete, but there are some really positive things happening. I just want to keep iterating that. So Anyway, that's all.
So has that one been solved then? Is that lead?
Yes, and I just received the signed papers the other day, and I'm getting ready to file them, and like I mentioned, I had forgotten to pass it on to the board, so.
And I sent you information on the training on the Weingarten rights that we should
Yes.
probably do next week.
Yeah,
for
so we
our
have some good
managers.
follow-up action to help avoid the same problem that resulted, or one of the contributing factors to that whole issue in the first place. So we get the issue, get the acute problem taken care of. We're identifying some of the underlying contributing factors, and then where we can, collectively, we're taking steps to kind of structurally address those. So it's a slow process, but it is making progress.
So would you suggest a holiday party for the staff and the board?
I think a holiday party is fine, I would not recommend alcohol.
I didn't say alcohol.
Holiday parties are great, I mean, I think they're a good way
I
for
just
people
think
to
there's so
come
many,
together.
I don't even know a lot of the workers. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. Have a safe drive.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move up another agenda item, and that is item 11, consideration of approving a professional service agreement for design and engineering services during construction for the fiscal year 2014-15 Force Main Apartment projects. The shopping, we were in an amount not to exceed $220,885, and authorizing the general manager to execute an agreement.
I'll give you just a quick introduction to this item. This is dealing with one of our high priority capital projects that came out of the IAMP assessment work. And part of that work focused on an assessment of the force main infrastructure. And there's a figure in the staff report, looks like this, that is a good reference for this discussion. And it shows you the locations of the force mains. But we've talked about this before. The force mains are the pumped pipelines. They're the pressurized sewage conveyance pipelines. They're some of the biggest, certainly most critical infrastructure in the district. And the IAMP assessment identified a number of acute needs on those. And basically, these aren't like replacing them, but they're improving or addressing deficiencies with what we call the force main appurtenances. And what that is specifically is it's the air release valves on those force mains and the cathodic protection systems on those force mains. And both of those systems are very much critical preventative systems. The air valves release the gases in the air that collect in the force mains to keep the hydraulics functioning properly, to avoid damaging hydraulic surges, and to avoid the operating inefficiencies that occur when the pipes get bound up with the gases. Those systems were found to be pretty much, in some cases, really not functioning at all. They're the old original air valves. So it was clear that getting those replaced was very critical. And then the second one was the corrosion protection systems. And same thing, in that case, the team really wasn't able to locate and use the test stations to assess the corrosion protection systems. So this is not the biggest capital project by any stretch, but it's one of the most critical. And we issued an RFP for design services to get this started. We sent that out in the standard fashion to a number of firms. We actually only got one proposal on this one, and it was Schaefer Wheeler. And so we did a fair amount of extra due diligence review to make sure that with just one proposal, it was still appropriate to go forward. And the staff recommendation is to go forward with the Schaefer Wheeler proposal. And the reasons behind that are, number one, the team that Schaefer Wheeler has is the same team that assisted in the original force main assessment work during the IAMP project, so they're very, very familiar with the facilities. We did a very extensive review of the proposal and looked at similar design service costs for other recent projects to make sure that their costs were competitive, and they are based on our verification. So between those considerations, staff feels like it is a very good proposal. They have a good work plan, it's a reasonable cost for the design services. And they bring a high level of familiarity with the system from the work that they did in 2013 on the IMP. And the team is here this evening to answer questions, as is Randall Ishii, the district engineer. So that's what you have in front of you, is consideration of approving the design services contract for the air valve and corrosion protection system upgrades. And I'll hand it back to the board.
Okay, well, I have one question. Why did we only get one bid?
We don't know. We sent this out to, gosh, probably almost 10 firms. Yeah. My conjecture, Tom, and that's what all it is, my professional conjecture, is that this was a kind of not a standard mix of activity. We weren't coming in and doing, a mile of force main or, a big pump station. This was somewhat specialized work. It's coming in and just doing the air valves. Corrosion protection, again, as well. Corrosion protection systems are highly specialized. I think, basically, the other consideration, there's a lot of work out there that the industry, the capital, the engineering firms that focus on the capital infrastructure, things have come back out of the doldrums, so there's a lot of activity. And I think between the combination of those, as my guess, that again is my conjecture, between the specialized nature of the work, relatively small project, and the market is very, very busy right now. This just didn't attract the attention we were sort of anticipating. Because in recent proposals, as you know, we've gotten, typically 4, 5, 6 proposals on some of the recent design contracts. So this one doesn't really fit the typical bill. That's my guess.
Board members, any questions?
A couple comments. In the past, we've gone out to bid with some projects, and the low bidder didn't get the project, and there were some hard feelings, I think, because of who was awarded a contract or wasn't awarded a contract. And I know Pat Roscoe and I we were sitting here one night talking about, are we creating a situation where folks are going to stop bidding on our projects because they're a little concerned about how we arrive at the end result. So I don't know if there's any fallout from some of that, but maybe. I'm reading the staff report in the bottom of the page 1 paragraph. It says $550,000 is budgeted for the force main improvements. Now, is this 200? So I understand it right. Is this 220,000 part of the 550, or is this 220 over and above the 550?
No, so the 550 is what is in the budget this year for the overall project, Frank. That would have, ideally it was for anything we do this year, design, construction, et cetera. So it would cover the 220, the $220,000, the $220,000 design services cost would be covered with a portion of that 550,000.
Okay, it's not the work. Do we have an estimate as to what we're going to spend on the whole project? For instance, the design phase is $220,000. What's the estimate for the project work? Are we $1.5 million, $2 million? I don't know.
That actually, you're not too far off. And Randall and Catherine Hayden, who's not here this evening, and actually some of the project team, we recognized that the planning level numbers that we put in the IMP tables are probably on the low side. We roughed those out. Remember, we were doing a high level cost estimates for the IMP, and this was considered a pretty small item. We didn't spend a lot of time on it. So we threw some numbers in there, and what we're finding now that we've got the design proposal and we've been surveying recent projects. We reached out to Vivian Housen, we've reached out to a number of other contacts to see what some of the recent construction projects have been costing for these. And I know this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I want to be responsive to your question. Our guess now is that these are very ballpark, because we're looking at anywhere from $1 million to $2 million before all these force main appurtenance upgrades are done. And we've got a whole bunch of recent project construction costs. So your numbers, I'm gonna call it a $1 to $2 million, yeah.
I remember when we were talking about this project, when we were gonna send the RFP out, and I said, aren't all the air valves, the pressure relief valves gonna be the same? And so why is it, 33,000 or some 30,000 a valve? Don't we design one and then we use a standard valve?
Not, yes and no, Tom, and others can comment on this. Typically, if you were to just look at the design features of the valve sitting inside the box, they ideally look identical, because you expect them to be the same valve within reason, because you want standardization. But each site is very different. So for example, the first site, the farthest east site, is adjacent to Sir Francis Drake, between that and the water by the ferry terminal. So very congested, very difficult area to work. The pipe is quite deep. The design in terms of that will be, a lot of that will have to do with how you're going to do the construction. You're going all the way down to the pipe itself to remove the old air valve attachment. And some of the other locations, each location on these air valves is quite different. So you actually have to do a site-specific design in terms of how you're going to get in there and do the work. Again, if you were to open up the box and look at the air valve itself, yes, you'd expect these to be highly similar, but not the overall sites.
Is pump station 11 San Quentin?
No.
Yes.
Oh, it is? Okay, I think that's, yeah.
CMSA is doing some rebuilding that pump
I
station.
just saw that in the staff report, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Noticed that.
Is JDH corrosion here?
Yes.
Yes.
Did other firms ask you to sub?
Yes, one other firm did, West Coast.
Oh, okay, but then they didn't submit a bid.
No. They were going to, I was talking to them, I think at the last minute, again, I think for all the reasons that Greg said, it's a small, sort of concentrated project in just a couple of key areas. I think to make it more attractive for them, it'd have to be a little larger project, of a little larger scale, encompassing more things to get them interested in it. I think that's, because I thought they were gonna submit a bid, but then I think they backed out last minute. It was just, like I said, as Greg says, everyone's getting busy right now, and I think this one's a little bit narrowly focused for them.
It's a good sign that our sub is used to, that several engineers want to use the sub. That's why I asked. Board members, any other thing? What's going to happen is you're going to design this, and then you're going to give us a pretty much better estimate once you figure out the designs. That's the whole point.
Does that mean we'll go up or go down?
Always going to be.
What's your percentage on going up cost? Do you have any idea?
On the overall construction cost, we put together some very preliminary costs, and right now at the planning level, we really don't have any idea as to what the overall site constraints are going to be. A lot of the costs are going to go into both traffic control and bypass pumping during construction. So it really depends on how we're going to attach that ARV valve to the force main, and if we actually have to bypass the force main. If we have to bypass the force main, it could double our construction costs.
How could you not bypass the force main?
Hot tap it. If we're able to hot tap it.
Pardon me?
If we're able to hot tap it into an active force main, then we may be able to eliminate a lot of our bypass pumping requirements. So those are the things that we have to work out during the preliminary design and figure out exactly what the constraints are going to be. I think that, our preliminary estimate was about 1.5 million. So I think it's going to be in that ballpark.
And we're not going to do it
Do
during
we
the wet
need
season,
any
right?
more? Greg, do we need any more air valves?
There will be a second phase of the project, yes, and we chose that approach on purpose, so I forget exactly how many, but there would be a phase 2 of this under a future contract to finish off the remaining air valves and also the remaining cathodic protection upgrades, yes. So we're anticipating one more project, to be specific, Tom, and that would complete all the upgrades ideally.
Are we done?
So we're all done.
Yeah, let's make a
Our
motion.
pump station's gonna be in pretty good shape, except for we're gonna replace one, right?
Oh, pump station's a whole other story.
Okay.
Yeah, and we actually selected to bring this project to you before pump station 12 and 13, which is the next major capital project, and we did that because this was something we felt we could get going quickly in the critical nature of the improvements, for the reasons we talked about. But the next capital project that the board will be seeing, you'll be seeing too, just to touch on that for a second. We're approaching 90% design on this year's 5 miles of gravity sewer rehab. So you'll be seeing a construction project contract for that probably right about the new year. And soon after or in parallel with that, you'll see an RFP request, and we'll be moving forward with with design of the overhaul of pump stations 12 and 13. So that'll be coming next. So there's going to be a couple of big projects coming away. Yeah.
At our last meeting, we had the flow-based study report.
Right.
And so it indicated we've got a few problems here. Are we gonna try to address those next year sometime?
Yeah, it's
Maybe
gonna-
take them out of
We need to give some,
sequence with something else? It looks like
yeah.
this is not a
Yeah.
good situation.
It raised some interesting, I think you were referring to these areas down here.
Yes, the
Frank,
Larkspur
yeah.
Boardwalk and the Larkspur Marine.
Yeah, so what I would anticipate there is we're already largely, we're almost approaching 90% design, or not, I'm sorry, that's not quite true. We're moving from 50 to 90% right now on this year's gravity sewer rehab, so that opportunity, that's already got a good high priority of 5 miles of piping. What I'm sort of anticipating is in the spring of this upcoming year, we get an opportunity to circle back to the flow study results and ask ourselves, do we want to prioritize any of these coastal areas, or what do you want to call them, these brackish groundwater areas, for the I&I reduction, the salinity impacts, whatever, and think about bringing some portions of those into the next 5 miles of rehab. I don't think we want to stop everything else and say, let's just do these, because there's more to it, but I think things like the boardwalk and some of the examples we talked about, I think we may want to do some more monitoring just to get a little more data, not the big program, but a little more spot monitoring. But you should anticipate some activities on some of these hot spots being considered in the next 5 mile batch of gravity sewer stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? We're looking for a motion to approve or
I
disapprove.
motion that we accept the proposal from Shopper Wheeler and authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement in the amount not to exceed $220,885.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item. What else do we have in the audience here?
So,
financial
the one item is in the consent calendar. It's final acceptance of the Barron's Slough project.
It's for Brown and Caldwell?
No.
No, it's Harrison.
Yeah, Harrison
What is
Associates.
Which one is
That
that?
was,
It's 8G in the consent calendar, so.
That was the one, I was out there, I had a hard time finding it on the first ride through, I had to go back and look again, so.
That's good.
I was riding with somebody and I said,
Before, you would've definitely
it should be
known.
around here somewhere, but, okay, wait a minute, we went past it, let's go back.
Yeah, you couldn't even see it.
Exactly, that was,
Good.
sure.
Yeah, it is nice, putting it all back together.
Well, see, it's a consent calendar item, and we're just trying to, people that are here on the agenda, I mean, here,
Oh, it's a progress one.
does anybody want to approve that, pull that off the consent calendar?
Yeah, but I know
I
things
don't want
to
to
do.
do it. Okay. We're on the consent calendar. The only other gentleman that's here is Mr. Gibbs, and we could, as part of the finance committee,
Report out.
We still haven't,
I know.
We haven't done a
well, I'm
consent.
trying
I
to-
just
I'm trying to get-
needed to know, that's all.
Yeah,
I thought you were
I'd like to
moving
get
on
people
from
that are here and have waited all night. And if we could have Mr. Gibbs make a little report on info item D so that he doesn't have to sit here till the bitter end.
I would be delighted. So I was last, we were last with you at your board meeting on October 15th, where you authorized us under the leadership of the authority of the general manager to sell your bond. We sold them in a competitive bid on November 4th at 10 o'clock in the morning. Happened in a flash, as it does, it's all electronic. And we were quite satisfied with the result. We had 5 bids, so we want to see several bids. And if you have our letter report, on page 2, there's a list of the firms who bid and what the interest rates are that they offered. And what we like about this result is that they were tight. That the spread between 1, 2, and 3 in particular, and even 4, is pretty close. So that's competition, which means we ended up with a result that's transparent and that I think you can be quite happy with. So your cost of funds for 30 million odd is 3.540430%, which seems pretty attractive. We then proceeded to button everything up, and we closed the bond issue on the 13th. And all the money is in the bank. It's going to be invested in a couple of days. We did quite a bit of work to explore how best to put the money to work before it's expended, and we finished that. And it'll actually be invested at the local agency investment fund, which is run by the state treasurer, and it'll be combined with a number of open market securities, sort of on the long end of your draw schedule.
Triple-A.
They're all permitted, permitted securities.
What's LAIF paying these days?
About 1/4%.
That's all.
That's all.
Even with that amount of money.
Yes.
We considered several investment options at the finance committee, and we rejected some that, with concurrence of our financial advisors, that kind of had some risk in them. And they were going to give us maybe 0.45 instead of 0.25. And I was very uneasy with them. And Jim didn't like them that much.
Yeah, the more digging we did, the less happy we were with. It all has to do with the continuing impact on the international banking industry. The people that provide these very specialized investment vehicles are very, very large banks. And they include Citigroup and Morgan Stanley, European banks such as Deutsche Bank and others. And there is so much going on right now in tightening up the regulation of banks so that we don't have another crash.
You mean the banks that are too big to fail?
Yeah, they're doing a lot of work to make sure that they just don't fail. And these things are unfolding sort of on a daily or weekly basis, causing some pretty significant changes in the way they have to operate. And it's really diluted the opportunity that you have to invest in bond proceeds. So we look very carefully, try a lot of things, and we're going to stick with the state treasurer.
And then, remember, we sized the bond issue at $30,770,000. That's what we went out with. Remember that? $3 million, that was what, we thought was the final amount. And what happened was we got a premium bid. So they bid more for our bonds than we were offering. So we wound up selling $30,155,000 but we still got enough to pay our proceeds. It's right on the,
That's on the third page.
the third page, see right there? It's,
Right here?
yeah, the first set of numbers. We
Right.
sold 30,155,000.
155, I see that.
And then we got a premium, they paid more than 30 million for the bonds, they sold them for more than that. So we were able to reduce the amount of bonds we issued and still raise the amount we need for the project account, which was 29,171. See that? So we got to reduce the number of bonds we issued, and we still raised the amount of funding that we needed.
At 3.5%.
3.5%. So, I think that was important to tell what happened. That's what happened with the finance committee. What that was important. And
Why does it say 3.54? Oh, I'm sorry. It's close.
CMSA is gonna refine about $56 million in bonds next year. Right in January. I'm not sure what kind of rate they're gonna get in January.
Not as good as this. We have no idea.
we're gonna get their proposal on refunding, and I'd like to talk to you about it. Because, see, that refunding, they're not gonna be able to call the bonds right away.
Right, they've gotta hold the money and.
So they gotta hold the money, and they have to pay off 2 bond issues.
Well, they can't do it until 2016.
But they refund it now, and they take the money to pay off the bonds in 2016, plus principal and interest in the interim, and put it all in the amount, and it really cuts into the savings. Anyway,
That's what
we don't need to talk about that.
That's right. I'll be glad to give you comments on that.
So, that's the finance.
Thank you, Jim. You were awesome.
You got the money.
And,
And it was a pleasure working with your staff, your consultants, and all of you.
And nobody said that they cut their top interest from 5.25 to 5, so we're not doing that.
No, we never even came close. All right, thank you again.
Thanks, Jim, for hanging in there.
Oh, yeah. Let's do
Brown and Caldwell, did you have an item here, some payments?
Well, there was just, in case there's any questions on the Magnolia trunk line progress payment.
Oh,
And which one is that?
That was F,
8F.
on the consent.
Okay, so this is in the Maggiore and Gelati, and this is the second payment, isn't it?
Correct.
That is correct. Are we gonna run any problems with the rain?
Now, the bypass pumping is in. In fact, they were doing cured in place pipe today, just up the road here at Magnolia and Doherty.
So that means it's okay with the rain?
They're working, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
If it's a real deluge, worker safety is critical.
Good.
But
I noticed that they didn't charge all their mobilization, and I thought that's got charged right off the bat.
well, some of that mobilization includes demobilization. That's a single,
Oh, it's
singular.
yeah, okay. So we don't need to pull that one from the agenda. do we? Okay. So, back to, well, we did the standing committee report out for finance. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
We had an HR committee meeting, Mary and myself, Greg, and we basically met with Sophia, who went over what we saw tonight, so we all have information on that.
Was it basically the same that we saw tonight?
What was exactly? We didn't see that, but we went through that exactly, yes.
Some of our committee meetings, we're duplicating some of what we're doing here,
I guess I would defer to the committee members. I find them helpful, Frank. They're, I guess short answer is no, I don't think so, not right now, but there's enough substantive discussion that goes on and kind of, direction, so.
I
yeah.
think some of the things that she discussed tonight, some of the examples she gave were because of questions that Mary and I asked during
Oh,
that.
good, okay.
And then the finance committee this time is really concentrating on the bond issue. You've got all the financial documents, but we were sorting out what to do with the legals and the investments and that, so it was different. Okay, so now we're into the consent calendar. Did anybody, or did you have a?
No, we were at, Frank and I were at North Bay Watershed, so we can do that. Yeah, there's a couple of things on that.
Okay, but so consent calendar, see, I had a change to 8A. So I listened to the tape that said I was going to do one of the vote of bond issue. And I said we could, but we wouldn't, so it was very misconfusing. So anyway, that sentence has been taken out.
Oh, on 8?
Yeah. It's item 14, President Gaffney also stated that was completely off. So I'd like to take 8A out and just do that.
Well, when we continued last time, we talked about that, we were gonna take it out.
Well, I listened to the tape, I went there, and it was back in again when I came to these minutes.
Oh.
And I went, wait a minute, let me listen to the tape, and
Yeah.
it was misconstrued.
Did you do the tape or the DVD?
Tape. Okay, any
I
other
don't
thing?
have any changes in the minutes, but I know we talked before about how much information is being transcribed, and I personally would like to see more. I don't know how the board members feel, but that's me. It's just not quite enough information. You're spending, depending on the issue, I suppose, I mean, some of them are pretty benign, but, I don't know.
How do other board members feel about it?
I like the idea of being able to go back to the tape or the DVD like what you did, if there's any questions. And I would really love to see ultimately that system in place where that some of the other agencies use, where you can actually not have to search at the tape to find something. That would be a lovely thing to do.
Yeah, you mean it
That
tells
you
you
could
where,
just-
what footage is on or
Exactly.
something like that,
That you could go look it up easier.
I thought what we said, you did it, Frank, that we kind of like, when we have numbers, put the numbers in.
Right.
And things like that.
The dollar amounts,
Yeah.
the years, the time, just some basic information, so that John P. Public, who happens to be out there, or Jane, and to pick it up and go, oh, that's what they did, that's why they did that, okay. I mean, I don't think we can refer everyone to a tape some central location in Santa Fe, or go to a CD or something. I think, we're gonna have the basic information in minutes. And we were trying to come in between, when we were getting these verbatim minutes, and then it was like really skeletal notes with nothing, and so we're gonna try to have some kind of a happy medium. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but I guess we're working our way towards that.
I vote for less is better for me, but I can understand, I like the key points in there. That's the way I feel about it. And if I have a question, it wasn't hard, because Sasha took me through the tapes and I got right to it.
And sometimes a board member may want to not support whatever's going on and would like to have the reason why they're voting yes or no, that's different from the rest of the board in the minutes.
Maybe we should request, I request it with my comment in the minutes.
Or comment for the record, you could say.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Can I make a suggestion, if you guys are interested?
Yes, please.
So the video is what's posted on the website of the meeting. The audio, at least for me, because I'm the one that's doing the minutes and trying to get used to how you guys like them. The system that I currently have on my computer, I cannot fast forward, I can't really pinpoint, and we don't even have them on the website. But if you want, I can go through the video and put the timestamp, try to figure out somehow, put the timestamp for each item.
That would be great.
So that way, because if you don't want to go verbatim, because it's too long. But you wanna do a basic summary, then I can go, okay, item 7, based on the audio, is at 25.12.12, and then you can click right on it, and then you can hear whatever it is that you guys have said.
Put
Yeah, and
put it right
maybe-
in the minutes.
Put it in the minutes.
Yeah.
Right in the minutes.
Yeah, no, exactly, that's, and I'll put that on the minutes as
That's
well,
okay,
once I
that's
figure it out.
okay.
It's gonna be a little bit more detailed, a little more time consuming, because again, I have to go through the
You
whole
have to go
audio.
through the whole-
Yeah, because I'm doing this in the midst of my daily duties through my 40-hour work week, so it's just a little bit more time consuming, but I can see what I can do to get it done, if that works for you.
It's easier than a full transcript, I would say, but, yeah.
Yeah, well, that way, yeah, because then you can, if you are to the details, you can quickly get to that
Yeah.
section of the recording. Okay.
These are so good.
And
Going
we,
through it
so
twice
the.
is magnificent.
I think we're getting good comments, I think we're getting a better sense, things like the dollar figures, the, clear position statements, so I think give us another round, and I think we'll start getting pretty close. And again, we're not missing the record, as you guys know, when we talked about, so we'll, that's my suggestion, is I know between everything we've heard from the last 2 feedbacks, I'm confident we can get these, I think, pretty close to what you guys are looking for.
Okay.
So if we, use this month as an example, meaning the meeting we've got here this evening, we'll be seeing those next. I think we'll make a real clean, concerted effort to get those reflecting what we've heard, and we'll see how close we can get. I think we got a good approach.
So we're on the consent calendar. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent calendar?
Yeah, the financial reports,
Okay, that would be D.
that's all.
I just have a question on an item.
On D?
Under the, let's see.
Yeah, that's D, Frank.
So
we're gonna
check
pull that.
register?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine, yeah.
You wanna go first?
I see that we're purchasing one of the, line or something like that,
You want.
I don't see it now.
A vacuum
The
truck?
Harbin?
The
Harbin,
Harbin.
yeah, that's the, yeah.
And we would, remember, that's the one they said that was really useful. It's
Yeah.
smaller, and it's really good for our type of hilly district.
Yeah, this is the second one. We have one already that we wanted to buy them and see how it's going and get the second one. And they're, by all accounts, just an outstanding piece of equipment for our district. They're much smaller, they're more nimble. They use much less water. They have a wide variety of tools and cutting heads. They're easier to haul up and, because the guys take the hoses and actually run them up and down the easements in some of the tough places. So the reports I'm getting back, and John can certainly speak more to this than I can, is that they're really turning out to be a really excellent piece of equipment for the district. So this would be the second one we actually have a plan, I think ultimately for 3 Harbins as part of the fleet, and as we talked in the past, you'll see probably less and less use of the rodders. We will never get rid of them entirely, like we talked about, but 3-4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, essentially our cleaning resources were constituted by the rodders and maybe one jetter and then the big giant, kind of the VACCON.
Yeah.
But the VACCON can't get to a huge proportion of our system, it's just too big. Anyway, these are all comments you've heard before. Main point I want to make is that the Harbins have kind of, at this point, are kind of tried and tested equipment for the district and really working out well.
So we have 3 crews, 3 separate crews? to run all 3 together?
Ultimately, they will, so for example, Frank, the first one we got with 2, the first one we've been using mostly for the point repairs, so the guys are using them to clean the pipes before they put in the repair sleeves, where we do the trenchless repairs. The second one, I thought, John, correct me if I got this wrong, the second one will go out to one of the cleaning crews and start being used in the cleaning crews. And then the third one, I guess, would probably largely be used for the cleaning crews as well. So you'd see less use of the other equipment, more use of the Harbins. Is that accurate?
Yeah, this one we were going to primarily stick on the CCTV crew.
Oh, very good, okay.
And the reason why they're going to be doing a lot of easements for this last part of the CCTV goals in order to get 100% of the system is some of the tougher, and it was intentionally planned that way. that they would be doing easements for this last section.
Yeah, and we're north of 90% done on the CCTV inspection of the system, the first pass on all the condition assessment, as John was mentioning, so the remaining areas include a lot of the really difficult to get to, just really tough spots that are in hillsides, inaccessible type things, so the initial use of the Harvins will be to support that, and then if you're looking out, whatever, I'm just gonna throw out, say, 2-3 years down the road, then, they're supporting a variety of needs.
So consent calendar, we pulled item D, a motion to approve the consent calendar, except item D.
Do we have anything else?
No,
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else, just D.
no, just D. So consent calendar A through C and E, F, and G.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoa, So B is included, right? Oh, D.
D we want to pull, that's the one you wanted to look at.
That's
Okay.
financials.
Okay, yeah.
So-
You know what it is? The E looks like a C. in that middle hand. Oh.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I motion that we pass the consent calendar with the exception of pulling D.
And this should be a roll call because you have a resolution.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call vote. And there is one little adjustment to the regular meeting minutes.
Where's the resolution? Where's
It's,
the resolution?
yeah, there is, it's in here.
G has a resolution. G.
I need a second on your motion as well.
I think it was, yeah, is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Where is the resolution?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
To the back of item 8G, and it's a standard, it's your
Notice of completion.
notice of completion acceptance of the project.
Change order is minus.
Here it is.
Mhm. Attachment D to G.
I have two copies. You want to see it? Okay, so it's moved and seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item
But that
D.
needs to be a roll call,
Right.
Okay, roll call.
or else we have a whole second.
Borstein,
Yes.
Scylla, oh, absent, Mapes,
Aye.
Egger,
Aye.
Gaffney.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, 8D. Interim, accept interim financial statement. Director Migs, you had some questions?
Yeah. Our PG&E bill is 11,000 something. We're going to look at it, right? Is there something we were gonna do with that like a few months back?
Where are we from?
Well,
No,
we have that
um,
utility outfit come in and do an audit. They were gonna audit
phone.
PG&E and the phone.
Right, what happened?
And the reason it got held up is they didn't get the phone bills, and so,
They didn't do, their focus
Page
was
5 is-
not the major PG&E bills.
Mhm.
Well, so just to clarify, so the review that outfit did was basically our I don't know what I call our sort of minor utilities. They weren't looking at our major, like our PG&E connections and so
Mhm.
forth. They were looking for other cost savings like phones and,
Okay.
everything else that we use. So just to clarify, the PG&E bills, the big ones, the big meters for the pump stations and all that were
Yeah.
not part of
Did we-
it.
that was not part of what they did?
No, Frank, because they were, I forget how they termed it, but those are what we call like time of use studies and what have you to see if they can find, hold on, let me back up.
No, I think they were checking
Yeah,
to see if
I
PG&E was
apologize.
putting
Yeah.
us in the right category.
Right, were they?
Even the big stuff.
Right, were they accurately billing, yeah, right, you are correct, Frank, I apologize for the confusion on my part. They were, I was mixing it up like a time of use study and so on, so forget what I just said.
And the reason the phone bills weren't done is because Wendy Martin Miller advised them that we were no longer interested in doing the phone bills.
Yeah, we've actually just completed a switch over, but that's kind of a conversation. I mean, we're basically moving over to a Comcast voice over internet, VoIP phone systems. So, but I don't know the details of what occurred with their work. I remember that discussion, but just so everyone's aware, we are making that switch over.
Did we go to a bid with something like that with Comcast?
Yeah, well, they're the only game in town. They gave us, they're basically doing an upgrade to our system. They dropped in some new fiber lines at both buildings, et cetera. So the VoIP upgrade was just part of that package that they gave us.
You know, telephone bills come in actually every direction, it seems like. Is there some firm, I mean, you know, instead of, why don't we just hire somebody to look at it if it's worth it? Is it?
Well, what happens now is, I happen to know that that particular area of Santa Fe is notoriously bad for getting any high-speed digital lines in anywhere. And Comcast has made a concerted effort in that area to drop fiber in. And once you get one fiber going in, then Comcast is servicing it, instead of having all that copper coming in, which is, you have to have one line, two pieces of copper for every single line on the system. Then you can have all of your Google voice over IP, and it significantly cuts the cost of everything, because you're running everything digitally then. And basically, nothing happens internal. You disconnect what was coming in before from AT&T and just plug in. It's a different modem that then comes out. It's phenomenally good, fast.
Anyway, I just wanted an update, and I know we talked about solar to see if it would actually help. But I know a lot of the pump stations may or may not, depending on where we put them and all that, but I know with everything going, the bonds and all that, but now we've got a window of time. Is there a way we could actually have that assessed about solar?
Eventually, yes. I mean, it's just a matter of, it's a matter of getting to
Before
it.
you die. No, I know it's like on the bottom of the list, but,
No, it's,
okay.
yeah.
All right,
We'll get to it.
and the only thing I had on the St. Rita's water leak for 6,000.
Yeah, you know, look, I marked that one too.
And I'm wondering, shouldn't that have come in before?
No, it was a pretty standard, actually. Just, it is a, larger than normal number, but they're a large user. And they had a water leak, and that had a big impact on their sewer bill. It was all very well documented. And MWD also corrected their billing. So
That was nice of them.
Yeah.
I had to pay $300 for
Yeah.
mine, I never got it right.
So yeah, it is a large dollar figure, but it
Yeah.
was all per the standard ordinance.
I did.
Yeah.
I had a leaking
I had a
toilet.
leak and they,
What was the number where were you on?
it's on page
6 of
Six of
7.
seven.
6 of 7, about
St. Regis
a
Parish.
third of the way down.
It's number 360.
And what it was a rebate. They had been overcharged.
Warranty reimbursement?
Yeah, their sewer service charge was based on water consumption, and,
It says water leak,
I asked the same one.
water leak. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
I remember seeing water leak coming down the sidewalk. I wondered where the heck that was coming from. I thought it was coming from the church. I couldn't figure that out.
You know what I noticed on this financials?
It was MMWD water. When I talk to people, they call it MMWD, they think there's a leak, and it takes them like a week or 2 or 3 to get out to check if there's a leak. I mean, we're supposedly a water crisis, so there's no urgency on their part.
You know, what I noticed on our financials is that our ending cash balance is going down and down, as expected. And the low spot is probably the beginning of December, before we get our money. And so we don't really have, we should look at our reserves as of December 1st, not July, because July they're kind of high. But it's, it's in the balance sheet. It's one of the first pages. It's one of the first pages. There it is. Anyway, that's it. So any other questions on the financial?
I do have a question on 3 of 7
Okay.
of that check register. And it's the bottom, it's line number 201. And it says on-site training. I probably should have asked that question while the HR person was still here. It just 20,000 even. I thought, 20,000 even? What is 20,000 even
It's,
for on-site training?
Yeah, Frank, that's actually that's a real specialized technical training. InnoVise is our computerized maintenance management software system. So this is, what we did was we had a team of 3 people from InnoVise actually out of the district a while back, working with 2 of our staff on this, some of the remaining implementation and on the CMMS. So that's what that's for. Why it's a nice round number, I'm not sure. I think they did a lump sum. They just did a lump sum contract for the training, and they provided us 3 people for, I forget, like, I don't know, whether it was a week or what. It was part of a pretty major push on the CMMS. But anyway, that's what that's for. So it wasn't really something that that HR would have been related to.
Okay, any other questions on the finances? Okay, a motion to accept.
So moved.
I second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, item, general manager's report, item 13.
Let's see, the main item I wanted to mention is it's again kind of back to the laterals. We did have a meeting with Andy Fagley from the Marin Realtors Association last week. And the purpose of that meeting was twofold. It was to begin coordinating on some outreach efforts, and I think it was a really productive meeting. It was myself and Danielle and Wendy and Andy Fagley, and I forget the staff person from his office. But we're working on planning for basically like an open house, ideally probably in this room or a similar facility, to rather than do sort of a like a traditional one-way communication. That's kind of what we had in mind, like we were gonna get a bunch of realtors in a room and, tell them about the ordinance. And this is actually Andy's initial idea. I thought it was really great, but so basically we're working on that. So the idea is it's gonna be more of an open house. We would have stations of information, a little bit of snacks, and it's just like come and go. They're pretty sure they're gonna get a pretty good turnout with the realtors. And that's to, again, kind of just keep the information flowing on the ordinance. You guys saw a lot of the communications from their organization, given their concerns about the pressure testing. I do think we've got that cleared up. It was, I think, fair to call it essentially a misunderstanding. And rather than, spend a lot of time and energy on it, we're acknowledging that some clarifying language would be helpful in the ordinance, so we'll be bringing you that back at the December meeting so that the ordinance implementation can go forward.
We know they weren't here tonight.
Yeah, right. And that, I guess, was an indication of the success of that meeting. So that was quite productive.
So are you saying that we don't do pressure tests, that they were
No, Frank, so they were reading the ordinance to require essentially 2 pressure tests, one at the very beginning and then one at the end after you've installed the new lateral. And it was we think a misinterpretation. It certainly wasn't what we intended, but we realized that if you took a specific read of the ordinance, you could make that case. So rather than, we think the simplest way to address it is just to clarify some of the language in the ordinance to make it clear that that's not what's supposed to happen.
But we do require a pressure test at the end to
We
make sure
do.
they do their
Yes,
job.
yes. A pressure test is always across the board required at the end of the day, like a East Bay Mud program, our program, where when you finally put in your new lateral and you're ready to sign off on the permit, that's the final standard quality control check. As you come in, you do the pressure test with either air or water. So there will still be a test, but it will be a end step for the new lateral, which is how it's done today, by the way. This isn't really new in the sense of how laterals are finally tested. Like any of those customers that have taken advantage of the grant programs, when their contractor got done putting in the lateral, as part of the final steps on the permit sign-off that we do, an RVSD inspector goes out there and observes the pressure test on that new lateral to make sure everything's functioning properly and it's installed properly. And that's the final quality control staff.
But we don't do it.
Correct.
Their contractor does it.
Right,
We just
and they
make
were.
sure it's right.
Yeah, no, I understand what
They
you're
get
getting
a
at there.
seal,
Right, so
stamp or something.
they seem to have an understanding, and I'm not sure how they got this, but they also seem to have an understanding that, they were citing the East Bay Mud program, saying that the East Bay Mud agencies do the pressure testing, and we're like, no, they don't. So that was a misunderstanding again. No agencies I'm aware of have their staff do the testing. You have contractors come and do the testing. So I think we got that cleared up as well. There's no expectation, to be crystal clear, that RVSD staff are out doing these pressure tests.
We
That's
break
done
the
by
pipe and then be
contractor.
responsible,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's very productive. Just a quick plug, because time's gonna go quickly, the CASA conference is coming up in January. Lots of activity on the Collection Systems of the Future initiative. John and I actually were in Oakland this morning for the most recent workshop. Just outstanding, really good information being generated there. Excellent conversation with the folks from Union Sanitary District on succession planning and staff planning and so on. They are an organization that I think is an example of a wastewater utility that's really gone through the transformation, come out the other end, and is just really functioning at a high level by all accounts. So you're gonna hear more, we're probably gonna be talking about examples like Union Sanitary District in the future, where we're looking for examples of best practices and what they look like.
Gray water stuff.
Yeah.
Yay.
So anyway, that's what's going on. Everything else that's been taking up my time is things you guys are already aware of, like the finalizing the bond issuance and, these other activities, so nothing.
Not that I want us to stay any longer, can you
Yeah.
spend 60 seconds? I think there's gonna be an EPA walkthrough
Oh,
tomorrow.
thanks, okay, and I know this is a big topic that will have a whole other meeting, including the standing committee meeting, but yeah, we've had a series of very good meetings with the working group. Separately from that, this is something that is just about the district and our work with the EPA. We have the site walk to address some of the remaining technical issues with our team. And this is just to finalize the conditions that they've given us for the proposed parking uses. A lot of progress. I know there's a lot of interest in that topic, so I'll be working with Pam and Frank to get a standing committee meeting scheduled. So, and I know you've already started on this, Frank, so we can get the public input going. I will say this, because I know there's a lot of conversations out there in the community, and there's a ton of interest in this topic for good reason. If you guys have specific questions, or you hear things that don't make sense, or whatever, raise concerns with you, please ask me, and I will get them answered. I can probably answer them immediately. There's a lot of good work going on, headed in the direction that we agreed to towards getting this going. And I want to avoid any or minimize any confusion, because I know there's a lot of voices in that conversation, and there's a lot of focus on the parcel right now. So if you have any particular questions, please just email me or call me, and I will do my best to get them.
So the EPA is going to go through.
Right.
And you and the EPA go out
Yeah,
there?
our technical team.
And they have their little checklist.
Yeah, Alvin Greenberg and Todd Miller, myself, Randall Ishii, probably someone from Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District, because they need to be aware of how that's gonna go. And what this is, to put it in context, is this is the final set of conditions that they want to see met as we go into actually constructing any of the parking improvements and doing any minor grading and what have you. So that's why it's called a conditional approval. The conditional part of that term means when you go do this, we want to make sure you do these things as well to help make sure there's no harm or risk to public health and all that good stuff. So it's a very technical, very specific set of conversations that they're having. That happens this week, and I think we'll know more, basically at the end of this week. So stay tuned. And that's all I've got.
Quickly to touch on it. So at the last meeting, we had a staff recommendation, and there was steps, there was 9 steps listed in the staff report.
Yeah,
But we only approved steps 1, 2, and 3. We got to identify the parties who will be partnering to implement and manage the parking uses.
okay,
We did not agree to develop a draft and final agreement governing the implementation, ongoing management, et cetera. Now, that's the next phase, I guess, once it comes to the board, then we're gonna say,
Right.
this looks good, or it does not, or whatever.
right.
So is the EPA has nothing to do with any of the archaeological resources that are on that land?
Correct,
It's
correct.
separate,
No,
it's only
there's-
separate.
Right, right,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Have we done 1, 2, and 3?
So our staff is doing 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, can
you're
you
quite-
read 1, 2, 3 again real quick?
Okay, number 1 says confirm general concept of public parking uses for an approximately 5-year planning horizon.
Okay, that's good.
Make sense to support Ross Valley Sanitary District's core mission and interests and achieve the intended broader public benefits, number
Okay.
1. Number 2, secure EPA approval, and EPA staff has stated is pending in the next few weeks. So that's,
Okay.
we got it verbal, not, in writing, you said you got it now in writing.
Yeah, I've actually got the signed one as of.
Got to sign one, and they're gonna be on site tomorrow, okay.
Right.
And number 3 was identify the parties who will be partnering to implement and manage the parking uses.
Okay,
So that you've been meeting with City of Larkspur.
Right, and with Golden Gate and Marin Airport and company. Did we also talk about
Country-
working with
Country
Larkspur?
Mart
Pardon me, and Country
and
Mart,
Marin
thank you.
General now,
Yes,
apparently.
well, they're not in it yet, they wanna be, but not yet. So I wanna make sure, because that's important, I think we're online with all those, and the other thing is I do know and I thought this was what we wanted to do, we were asking Larkspur for guidance on what they're gonna be looking for in terms of permitting and sequence.
That's important.
So we don't get too far down the road. Okay, so those are the things we're doing. If I've implied we're doing more than that in any of my prior communications, then that was not my intent. Those are the things we're doing right now. Now, everyone's like, there's 4 parties in those, couple of those meetings, so someone may say, hey, this is an issue we should think about if we get to the lease stage. We're like, okay, we'll write that down, that's an issue we should keep in mind. But no one is coming up with terms and conditions, no one's talking costs. I want to be clear with you guys, none of that's happening. If you hear anything other than that, it's misinformation. We are, as far as I know, following the direction that you guys had. I will say this, the working group has really caught fire. I think they're really working hard on this. The Golden Gate people, the Marin Airport people, the Larkspur folks have been very responsive, the Country Mart people. We have said in so many words, you need to make this work for the district. And I think they've taken that to heart, and they're really, really working hard to try and make this happen. There's no guarantees, but I think you've got a group that is really putting their back into this right now. So it's
And we will be the lead agency.
possibly, Frank, and there's a little bit of a technical issue, and that would certainly be an obvious alternative, because we own the land, but I don't know if it'll be absolutely required, but I think that's a safe assumption, is if, as the owner of the land and the, the leasee or the leaser, whichever is the word, there's a good chance we would be the lead agency. And I only say possibly, and this is again, a conversation for another day, but it's possible there might be an appropriate way to have Golden Gate be the lead agency, we're in some sort of supporting role. And the only reason I say that is this: the more work that the partners are doing, the better. We wanted that. We don't have time and resources to do this. So if the lead agency, if there was a way
I
to
don't
have
think
a lead
Golden Gate
agency.
Transit can legally be the lead agency.
Yeah, and you may be right. Like I said, I don't know. So we'll figure that out. We haven't got to that stage of the conversation. Yeah, but it's an important question. For sure.
And there were folks here who were previously involved with the site, who were bringing up some legal issues.
Yeah,
And
Michael
so
Hoover.
we need to talk about
Yep.
some indemnification for this agency.
Yes.
Should someone disagree with whatever
Happens
solutions
out there,
arrived at
yeah.
and
Yeah.
attempt to litigate this agency over something that some other agency's gonna do there?
Yeah, and it's an important, there's a lot of issues at play. And just one last thing for the city of Larkspur's concerns, they're getting ready to finalize their updated housing element, and I think they talked about this. Because that site is one of the assumed areas,
Right.
then they don't
The
want to see
zoning.
something that takes it out of play for a certain amount of time. We're aware of that. Dan Schwartz and Neil Top have been part of these working group meetings. They've been very upfront. about the city's concerns, so that no one's holding back. I don't think.
We don't believe that.
So,
Okay, verbal reports from any of the board members?
Well,
14?
Frank and I went to the North Bay Watershed, and they had an update on their TMDLs, which is various studies in the watershed in these 3 different counties about pathogens, and there's one going on in Richardson Bay currently. And so they're looking at the sources, but they're basically saying that the sources of pathogens are from
Birds?
stormwater,
Stormwater.
household,
Creeks.
houseboats, marinas, and sewer laterals. Let me see.
What about birds? I can't believe that Richardson Bay is impacted by birds.
I don't know,
Right.
so, I don't, you know, it was a 2-hour meeting, and they also talked about projects they're doing in Napa. But it was rather interesting, so.
I was there as a CMSA person,
Yeah.
because Kathy Hartzell was unable to attend, she's the regular, I was the alternate.
Okay, can we quickly look at the exhibits? Our legal downward trend took a hit last month and a little bit of a hit this month. That's item A. But I think a number of the, let's see, so Greg, then I see that personnel matters, is that gonna be, that's over now, you know, the legal costs for personnel?
there was a little bump in personnel, and that was a combination, part of that was the Lieber Cassidy work on the, resolving the unfair labor practices charge we mentioned.
We
And then
never heard about that, did we?
You came to you guys' attention almost a year ago, so it's been out there for a long time. It took us this long to get a hearing, that's what we were talking about earlier when Sophia was here. We literally just got that resolved, and she attended that hearing and helped with some of the negotiation. So that was a big part of that. The big, and probably won't get too much into this evening, but, the big jump is just a lot of the time related to the trial stuff. And that's really the short version of what's
Yeah, but
causing the
also-
bump in the cost.
Also, it would be good to itemize review of legal documents for the bond sale. It's,
Oh, yeah, that's in general legal.
Does
That's
it show
also,
up here?
it's in general legal and
Yeah.
personnel activities,
Yeah.
it's in that first category.
So that's not all our council, it's also.
No.
Those are councils reviewing documents for the,
For the bond measure.
yeah.
Right, so we've had a big slew of activity on general legal. We've had contracts, we've had, Jolie and others helping out with the disclosure process on the bond document. So all that work is done at this point. But there was a lot of pretty objective factors contributing to these jumps. I know we all don't want to see them, but it's all relatively understandable, predictable stuff that we,
Okay. And B was the finance committee, C, which we went over, C is HR, and D was part of the finance committee's buried capital. Okay. Any other things?
Future items, right?
Future agenda?
So I
items
want
and
to
future-
propose that the staff and the board have a holiday open house on a Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 o'clock. Where board members can come in and meet staff can meet board, I don't know, what do you think?
You say staff was everyone?
Yeah,
The
4 to
whole-
6 o'clock on a Friday
The whole crew,
afternoon. Yeah,
not just management people?
no,
Okay.
everybody,
May I offer a suggestion?
yes.
That it be earlier?
Ah.
And the reason why is most of our staff
Is gone.
would probably not
Okay, what
attend.
would
So
be
do
a
it
better
on
time or
Thursday,
day or something?
2 to 4
2 to
would,
4 in the afternoon. Yeah.
Friday?
Three,
Yeah.
oh,
Mhm.
Yeah. We would notice it because all 5 of you would be there. but
I
that's-
mean, the
that's
other
fine.
option was
Just
to
a-
go to the restaurant down the street, because I know some people want alcohol, that way they can buy their own. So I just wanted some
Yeah,
ideas, what do you think?
I had already started talking with Wendy and others about just doing something really informal at the staff level at a minimum, because I know we haven't done much in the last couple of years, and we'll just be in the new
Nothing.
year. Let me put it this way, if with that kind of idea in mind, we'll get back to you with some options.
Okay.
But to John's point, probably 3/4 of our staff is like Petaluma and North.
That's
and
fine, I just threw
Yeah.
that out there.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
we'll work on
I would,
something.
the one time I've seen in 4 years was a barbecue. I haven't seen anything else since.
Well, the way
Unless
this
you guys are
weather's
doing
going,
separate
That was
stuff.
when Greg first came, this first week, or first day.
First day. That was a safety barbecue, I think.
No, I didn't go to that. We were
I
invited.
remember Frank was there, because we popped.
I was there.
Yeah.
Well, but,
I invited myself, I think.
so why don't you, John, why don't you
And
see,
brought Greg.
and Greg,
Yeah, we'll work on
if
something.
if
I
you wanna do
think
the
it's a good idea.
restaurant thing, it might be better,
It's
But it's
easier.
still employee related, so
so.
talk to Sophia, because if it's still employee related and then there's drinking. and then-
Oh, no.
No, they
This is
can
just
buy
the-
whatever they want, but,
This is
so
the
we would
afternoon.
supply
It's-
a basic, maybe
Yeah,
buffet.
I know, no alcohol. Yeah.
We would still be liable.
We'll check with Sophia on
Yeah,
that, because
Okay,
it's still,
well, anyway.
it's still, work.
So we've got a little
Related,
time,
yeah.
we've got a little time.
Okay, we'll get something
And
going.
then
We're
for
already working on it.
agenda items, I talked to Greg today about doing a summit for sanitary districts after the first of the year, and we would be the host. And it would be to look at what's working, what's not working, how can we help each other better. And the laterals was one big thing that's come up, and the loan programs. And then, of course, the strategic plan, I think that we should just jump on it after January 1st. And I think Vivian and Rita might be a good source.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, meeting adjourned.